Well, good morning, folks. My name is Enrique Urrutia, and I will be the trainer for this session. A little bit about me. I'm from Chile, South America. I've been, working as a food safety auditor for about 20 years, and in specific for PrimusGFS since the very first version 1.6, a long time ago. The purpose of this session. In this session, we're going to touch bases, with PrimusGFS version 3.1, version 3, revision 1, yeah? For the module 1, the food safety management system, module 2, the farm module, formerly known as the ranch module, and the harvest queue module, module 4. Just in case if any of you was, expecting to see the greenhouse or the indoor agriculture module in this session, I'm sorry, it's not part of this session. For that, we need to set a specific session because the changes from version 2.1 to 3.1 in PrimusGFS are a lot, yeah? Okay, so let's go over this. This session includes the main changes and new requirements in the PrimusGFS scheme from version 2.1-2C to version 3.1, yeah? Version 3, revision 1. We're going to review program regulation. Mostly the regulations were important for you to know about them. Like I have news for you, for example, surveillance audits. Yeah! Now the program is including surveillance audits. Also, we're going to touch bases with module 1, the food safety management system. There's no big changes in the standard. There's a few new in this module. If we compare it against, version 2.1, there's a few new questions, nothing so complicated, yeah? And then we're going to go by the module 2, the farm module, and harvest queue modules. Again, there's no big changes in terms of requirements, but there's significant changes in terms of scoring of some questions. Yeah, there's a lot of new potential automatic failure questions in module 2 and module 4, mostly related with water. Yeah. PrimusGFS version 3 was approved by the GFSI on July 2, 2018. Yeah, so currently version 3, revision 1 is recognized or benchmarked against the GFSI. Timeframes and transition period for version 3. Version 3 has been available, for certification bodies and auditee, you guys, since August 6, 2018. But now we have, at the same time running version 3 and version 3.1. Both of them will coexist until January 15, 2020. What means that? At this time, up to January 15, you can apply for your inspection, under version 3 or version 3.1. Just an advice, version 3.1 simplify a lot, several questions. So I recommend you, if you're going to apply, before January 15, to use version 3.1. A lot of requirements of version 3.0 were withdrawn from the standard after, a lot of feedback by auditees, certification bodies, industry, people, etc. And version 3.1 will become mandatory from January 16, 2020. So that's, the date when the only version that will be available for you, for us, will be January 16, 2020. All the normative documents for PrimusGFS are posted and are free in the website. The address is there, www.primusgfs.com/documents. But just something to keep in mind. For the people who knows the standard, probably you're going to be looking for the interpretation guidelines, who is the most, detailed expectation of compliance against each one of the questions in the standard. But the thing is, PrimusGFS is still, working on them. In other words, it's still not available in the website. So as an advice, you can use as a reference, the interpretation guidelines for version 3.0, while PrimusGFS, Azul, the scheme owner, release, those interpretation guidelines. I expect that they should be ready very soon, yeah? Okay. PrimusGFS changed the structure in terms of different modules. In the past, in version 2.1, we have, module 1, the food safety management system, module 2 with 2 branches, GAPs and GMPs. GAPs, the field part of the standard with, ranches, harvest queues, and greenhouse. And module 2, GMPs, the GMPs, plus module 3, the HACCP section. Now they changed this. Now they have 7 modules. First, in module 1, the food safety management system, as in the past. Then we have in the GAP side of the deal, we have three modules. Module 2, that is the farm module, formerly known as ranch. Later, I'm going to explain you why they changed the name. Yeah. Module 3, indoor agriculture, that is formerly known as the greenhouse, part of the standard. And Module 4, the harvest crew. In the case of the facility manufacturing part of the standard, we have three modules. Module 5, the facility module, the GMPs, the good manufacturing practices. Module 6, the HACCP module, and something very, very new. Module 7, the preventive controls module, that will be optional for facilities. It's not mandatory to go over that module. Will be the auditee call to decide if they want or not to apply, including preventive controls. Okay, let's go over the regulations. Well, there are several changes to the program regulations. That's including, new competence requirement for new auditor. That's not something important for you. It's important for us as a certification body. Requirement for current auditors, how to maintain, to keep their credentials. Surveillance audits, that's for you people. Well, for both sides, the auditee and the certification body. Yes, the standard is required to start, conducting some surveillance audits. And the option to request an inspection as unannounced. Yes, you can request an inspection now as an unannounced. And if you decide to go over that path, your certificate and your report will show that the audit was conducted as an unannounced. Later, I'm going to show you in detail which are the rules of this. And together with the usual documents, the program regulation, the checklist, and the expectation and the interpretation guidelines, there are three new documents, who applies for the GAP part of the standard. The table 1, agronomic inputs. That's, is what we knew in the past as the fertilizer section in PrimusGFS version 2.1. Table 2, irrigation water use. Yeah. And table 3, pesticides usage. What are those tables? These tables mostly show you, depending, for example, in the case of irrigation and water use, that means pre-harvest water, if we think, in the produce safety rule, which specific questions applies in the standard, depending, the type of water source that you're using, yeah? Together with this, in the document comes, a brief explanation of the expectation of compliance for each one of those questions. But I'm going to give you an advice. When you're implementing, PrimusGFS, your GPS, your technical GPS should be the interpretation guidelines. Because there's two documents in the standard. Well, really in this section 3, we have the question and expectation, that is the question, plus a brief explanation of the expectation of compliance. We have the interpretation guideline, that is the expanded, expectation of compliance, very detailed with examples, etc. Yeah. And that's the document that you should be using as a reference when, dealing with the implementation of the program. But in the table, for pesticides, for water, and for fertilizers, really, comes together with these tables. It comes a brief explanation of compliance. So I'm going to suggest you, instead to follow the explanation of compliance or the expectation of compliance in those tables, to still continue using, the interpretation guidelines. Those are the best document to follow or to understand which are the requirements of the standard. Again, these tables are very good, to define which specific questions apply for you in this chart. If you see, for example, in this case, if you're using well water, here is the list of questions who applies, when you're using well, to source water for irrigation, plant protection products application, fertilizers application, dust abatement, wherever. Wherever is related with pre-harvest water. So in other words, any water used for agronomic purposes. Let me see if there's any question. Okay. And give me just 1 second. I just saw that Mr. Jeff Green joined us. Jeff, I miss you. It's been a long time without seeing you. Nice people from Georgia, yeah, that I audited them in the past. Okay, let's continue. Other changes to regulations. There's 2 new inputs that you need to choose when you're applying for a PrimusGFS audit. The first one is countries of destination per crop. Let's say that you're growing any crop and your company intends to sell this product in a foreign country, let's say in Europe. So if that is the case, you need to include that in your application. But this is not just to include this in the application. This will have consequences. Yeah. Which are those consequences? This is going to trigger the applicability of questions in the pesticide section related mostly with compliance with the maximum residue levels of those countries of destination. So please, if you're going to decide to go on that path, including your destination countries when they're other than the United States, in the case of United States producers, you need to be aware that this is going to trigger the applicability of three extra questions in the pesticide section related with Emerald compliance. And the big deal here is, if you're not prepared to show compliance against those questions are automatic failure questions. So potentially you can fail the audit. So think twice before choosing the application for your audit or in the registration, process. If you choose any country of destination, you need to be prepared for that. Yeah. The other new thing is that you can choose to schedule the audit as announced or unannounced. Probably, people is more comfortable knowing when the auditor is going to show up. But maybe some buyers could start pushing you to schedule the audit as unannounced. Yeah. At the very end, it's your decision, not the buyer decision. We, as a certification body, deal with you guys. So if you decide to go with the unannounced audit or announce, it's your call. Yeah. Now, if you choose to schedule your audit as unannounced, these are the rules of the deal. First, you will receive the notification of the audit date 48 hours, 2 working days before the inspection. But if by any reason you do not accept, this first attempt, then we're going to conduct, the audit in a further date. But in that case, the audit will be conducted as announced. Yeah. There's no sanctions, nothing. Just we change from unannounced to announced. And the audit report and the certificate will display these conditions. So if you choose to go over an unannounced audit, that is going to be in your certificate in your audit report. Let me see if there's any questions. Okay. Okay, no questions. So let's move to the next slide. What else? Brand new in version 3, surveillance audits performed by the certification body. These rules apply for the certification body, so we must comply with them, but this is going to have potential consequences over you as an auditee. First, each certification body shall conduct surveillance audits for their certified operations. Ideally, each certification body should conduct surveillance audits for at least the 2% of their certified operations. So if a certification body, let's say, have 100 certificates, in a 12-month period, at least 2 of those certificates, at least 2, of this operation must be chosen for an unannounced audit. Yeah. So that's going to have consequences on you. You could be notified that you are going to receive an unannounced, a surveillance inspection. Now, the selection of the operation is not a random selection. We need to justify why we choose A, B, or C operations, a farm, a crew, a facility, wherever. And this should be based on risk assessment approach, considering, for example, the compliance history, Compliance history is not the same, someone who finished with a few, non-compliances or deviation at the end of the audit, that someone who finished the audit, with several non-conformances, even if you implement the corrective actions. So if you have too many non-conformances or non-compliances, that's going to increase your chances to be chosen for a surveillance inspection. The same with complaints. If we receive any complaint from a buyer, from the standard owner against a specific operation, for sure that's going to increase a lot the chances in regards, surveillance inspection. If you're involved in a recall, and don't forget something, in the FSMS, if you read in detail, the expectation of compliance for the recall program, or the recall SOP, the recall procedure, you will see that in case that you're involved in a recall, you must notify your certification body. Yeah. And of course, other facts to consider is the risk of the process, products in the scope, etc. Let's say thinking in the historical, issues, with romaine lettuce. If you're growing romaine lettuce, of course, that is a crop that, historically, as has a lot of problems, with recalls and even outbreaks. So that increase those chances to be chosen for a surveillance audit. But at the very end, we put all these, facts in a blender to decide which is the best call to choose as a certification body, which operations will be, chosen for the surveillance audit. The rules for the surveillance audit: you will be notified 48 hours, 2 working days before of the inspection. If the first attempt, you could reject the first attempt, but with a good reason, not because you're busy or you're tired. That's not a good reason. For example, because the staff is on vacations, or you're sick, or there's a natural disaster, a earthquake, wherever in the area. Now, if you reject the first attempt under a good reason, yes, that's acceptable. But the certification body, we must follow up, with you, and we're going to propose you a second attempt. Now, if the second attempt is rejected, the certificate will be suspended. Yeah? Let me see if there's any question. Okay, no technical question, just questions about, the use of this platform. And Matthew's taking care of that. Okay. New things were written in the standard, in the program regulations, but really is not a new requirement. Yeah? The first one, yes, is a new requirement. For all non-conformances, any applicable question that was scored with 0 points, in other words, the auditor gave you a total non-conformance against these questions, will be mandatory to submit corrective actions. Now, sometimes it's not possible to implement corrective action because it's not technically possible, or you don't have the resources to do it. But even that, you need to address in the corrective action, process, how you mitigate, how you reduce the risk related with that non-conformance, even if the corrective action or what you submit as corrective action is not accepted. But you need to send the information, yeah? And something that is new, I highlighted this in red, is new in the program regulation, but really is not new in the standard. In version 2.1, if you remember, for the people who have been using version 2.1, we have a question in the FSMS related with the corrective action procedures. Yeah. In the past, when someone was not following the classic steps, the cause determination, implementation of the corrective actions, the follow-up, etc., we usually downscore against the SOP, because the SOP has not been properly implemented, and that, becomes evident when you submit your corrective actions, yeah? But now that is very clear written in the program regulations that the corrective action should include determination of the cause, why the problem happens, the action plan to address immediately the issue, the corrective actions. Two different words here. How to correct immediately the issue. That's a correction. The corrective action is something more significant. Is the corrective action that you're implementing is preventing this from happening again. Yeah. And also in your corrective action process, you will need to identify how you're going to follow up. Yeah. To assure that the corrective action that you implemented stop the problem from happening. Let me give you an example. For example, if you're an inspection, harvest crew inspection, the auditor noted that 3 harvest workers didn't wash their hands after using restrooms. The classic, corrective action in the past was to submit a retraining record for those 3 workers. Yeah, but now that will not be enough. First, you need to determine why this happened. Probably was by lack of training. But what about if you start, reviewing, the training record for those 3 people who were caught without washing their hands, and you see that there's a lot of trainings related with hand washing practices for them? So do you think that an extra training, another training, is going to resolve the problem? Probably not. Probably the problem could be lack of supervision. Maybe the corrective action should point not the workers, the crew foreman, for example, for this, scenario. So that's, the purpose of this, very clear new regulation that really is not a new requirement, but now, is written in the program regulations. So if you submit a corrective action without considering, these facts, cause determination, you can use a root cause analysis, the Ishikawa diagram, or the best, tool that you have to determine why something happened, your common sense. Yeah, but you need to document that. Then you need to explain the correction, what was immediately, implemented against this problem, which is the corrective action that in theory, should point how this is going to prevent this from happening again. And lastly, how you're going to follow up. And the follow up, I've seen, for people who has been audited under version 3.1, that some people miss that part in their corrective action process. So what you could do there, for example, ideas. You can follow up, the effectiveness of the implementation of a corrective action through your internal audit program or through the external audit program. So in other words, you pass the ball to the certification body inspector, yeah, or extraordinary visit, wherever. But you need to document this, yeah. Let me see if there's any question about this. Okay, no. And something that is not new, but now is very clear explained in the program regulation, for inspection or operations for GAPs or GMPs with an overall score less than 85% in the preliminary report, it's possible to submit corrective actions, and the auditor must review them and give you, an answer, accepted, rejected, partially accepted, wherever. But even that, the audit will fail. Why? Because the scores are not going to change. So if you finish, your audit in any of your operations with less than 85%, be aware that your audit is not going to achieve certification. Now, if you're on the edge of the 85%, let's say 84.9, maybe it could be a good idea to review, the findings of the auditor against, the interpretation guidelines, the guidelines of the standard, to see if the auditor made any mistake in terms of scoring. Maybe he gave you a major, and according to the guidelines should be a minor. So that can help you, to recover those points to have at least an 85% and continue in the process to achieve certification. Let me see, questions. Okay, nothing. The bad part of the standard, sanctions. There's two types of sanctions, suspensions, yeah? The suspension apply, for example, if a recertification audit results in an automatic failure, while you still have a valid certificate for that operation, that valid certificate will be suspended. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because an automatic failure means that something serious in terms of food safety was found, during the inspection. Yeah. The other cost for a suspension if you don't pay the bill. So if the agreed fees, the invoice, is not paid to the certification body has the right to suspend that operation. Yeah. And if an organization rejects a surveillance audit in the second attempt, the certificate will be suspended. Now, this suspension could escalate to a more, complicated sanction, revocations. In the case of a suspension, if a cause of suspension is not in result in the time set by the certification body, let's say that, for example, the customer didn't pay, the audit invoice. Well, the certification body can suspend them, but if later the corrective action is to pay the invoice, the certification body should, reinstate your certification cycle. So in that case, it's possible. And in fact, for any suspension, the certification body should notify you about the suspension. Usually it's by an email, an automatic email by, the PrimusGFS system. But at the same time, the certification body should submit a letter stating, which is the time given for you to resolve the cause of that suspension. And if you fail to resolve the cause of that suspension in the time set by the certification body, I'm sorry, the operation will go over a revocation of the certificate. Other reason, for certificate revocation, if it's the company is making fraud or is going to bankrupt. Yeah. Now, the bad part of the revocation is that the producer, the organization, the operation is out of the game for 6 months. So If a certification body, impose a revocation of any certificate for any of your operation, that organization cannot apply for certification with any certification body for a period of 6 months, counting from the date where the certification body imposed the revocation. Yeah. Okay, that's, the most important part with the program regulation. Now, I'm going to suggest you to read them. It's not too many pages. It's about 24 pages to see the specific details. But what I just show up is the most important new stuff, new things, in the program regulations. I think one of the most important, the two most important things for you, or the three really, is, the thing of the countries of destination in the application. Why? Because that's going to trigger the applicability of several questions that usually are not applicable when you're growing or harvesting only to sell the product in the local market. Yeah. The second one is the surveillance audit. Yeah, you could be chosen for that. And the third one will be how to deal with your corrective actions, as the outcome of, the certification body inspection. Don't forget cause determination, correction, corrective action, and the follow-up. I'm going to insist on this. The follow-up, a good idea is to make reference to your internal audit program and your external audit program. In other words, you during the internal inspection and we during the CB inspection, we're going to assess if the corrective actions that you implemented as the outcome of the last set of corrective action as the outcome of your CB inspection were efficient to prevent the same problem from happening again. Yeah. Any questions so far? Okay, I have a question here from Lisa Winter. Surveillance audits. Is it possible if I had my annual announced audit on July 5th for the CB to request a surveillance audit before my season ends in mid-September same year? Lisa, the certification body could call for a surveillance audit in any time, during the validity of your certificate. So, for example, if you achieve certification for a farm, on January 1st, and your certificate runs up to December 31, we as a certification body can do a surveillance audit in any day, during that period from January 1st to December 31. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're not in operations. Of course, if you're not in operation, let's say, it's a farm, and it's a leafy green farm, and there's no crops on site, well, even that we're going to show up, and we're going to inspect all the potential applicable points based on what is occurring at the time of the audit. Of course, probably a lot of questions will go to NA because practices are not occurring, yeah? But even that, we could do it, or the certification body could do it. Let me see if there's any other question. Lisa, that answers your question? I hope so. Okay, let's go over the module 1, FSMS. Really, in module 1, there's no, major surgery. Yeah, there's some new questions, not so complicated to comply with them, but some of them are going to give you some extra work, especially with big companies. I mean companies, for example, with a lot of workers. Yeah, let's go over those new questions. The first one, I've been seeing people struggling with this one in version 3. Is there a training management system in place that shows what type of trainings are required for various job roles of specific workers? I'm going to stop there. Really, the first part of this new question is not new. Why? That the first part of this question is looking for a training program. What means the word program? What should be done and when? That's all. Yeah. So in other words, you need to have a document showing, for the different type of, jobs, related with food safety, of course, in the company, yeah, or in the operation, what type of training they should receive during the season, during, the year, yeah. For example, applicators, people, harvest workers, etc., ranch manager. And you just show which is the program, which trainings and when and to who, yeah. But the second part of this question is absolutely new. Look, including who has been trained and when they were trained and which training they still need to take and a training schedule. So in other words, the second part of this requirement, you need to be able to prove the level of advance of implementation of your training program. Yeah. And here comes the complicated thing, if you're a small company, really it's not a big deal. Let's say that you have, in your operation, less than 10 workers, in your organization, less than 10 workers. Probably you can show the level of implementation of your training program just showing the training records. Yeah. But the problem, is when you are a company, with several workers, it's almost impossible. Let's say 100 workers. You're not going to be able to show that you're tracking the level of implementation, of the training program, just showing the training record. So probably you need to have something else documented, like a training matrix. I've seen very creative, forms to deal with this. A matrix and spreadsheet that identify the different positions, in the company, the workers, responsible of those positions, yeah, and then in the top they have the different trainings, the whole, all the trainings that the company provides during the season. And then they cross-match, the person or the job, with the specific trainings that they need to receive. And then they add a second column showing when each one of or a second spreadsheet where, there's a summary of all the trainings that all the people's, the names, the specific workers covering those positions received during, the cycle. Yeah. I have another question here from Norma Chavez. Let me see. Our last audit was on December 2019 under version 2.1. We have just been chosen for a surveillance audit. Oh, okay, Norma, I'm not sure which is your certification body, but there is a mistake. If you're certified under version 2.1, you run with the rules set in PrimusGFS program regulations in version 2.1. So really the certification body cannot put you, in this program because you were certified against, version 2.1, and that rules didn't run, in version 2.1. So my suggestion is, if this is a real case, talk with your certification body. Okay, yeah, don't need to identify, the name of the certification body. I know them; they're very good friends. Yeah, let them know that you are certified under version 2.1, and according program regulation, there's no such type of surveillance audit. And even more, you can make reference that you signed the sublicense agreement, or your company signs the sublicense agreement against version 2.1. So the sublicense agreement is a contract in between the auditee and the certification body, where the rights, and obligation of each parties are, included. In the sublicense for version 2.1, there's no such thing, yeah? In other words, out of scope for you a surveillance audit under version 2.1 under these rules. But may I do a parenthesis? Even in version 2.1, the certification body has the right to conduct surveillance audit when there's a very good reason. For example, you're involved in a recall. Oh, yes, if you're involved in a recall or even worse, in an outbreak, yes, the certification body has the right to request a surveillance audit. But in your case, against version 2.1, yeah? I'm not sure if that is the case, but keep that in mind. Now, if you were chosen just for the rule of the 2% for the version 3, no, it's out of scope, okay? I've seen this more than one time. Some certification bodies are, confusing this rule, yeah? These rules about the surveillance audit are for people, companies, or operations certified under version 3. Next question. Oh, this is a very easy question. Where specific industry guidelines or best practices exist for the crop and or product, does the operation have a current copy of the document? For example, if you're growing leafy greens, lettuce, spinach, wherever in California or in Arizona, we know that LGMA, the Leafy Green Marketing Agreement, applies for you. So you need to have a copy of that. Now the copy could be in a, in a printed copy, or you can show, the access straight from the LGMA website. Yeah. And other examples of guidelines, who applies in the United States industry is the California Cantaloupe program, the TGAPS, the Tomato Good Agricultural Practices, and something that is not here in the example, but for example, if you're growing mushrooms, you need also to have a copy of the American Mushroom Institute, mushroom guidelines. Yeah. And don't forget something. Since the very first version of PrimusGFS, they refer where there's any, industry guidelines or regulation who is more demanding, more strict than the guidelines set in the PrimusGFS standard. Those laws, those industry practice, those industry guidelines override, the expectation of compliance of PrimusGFS. And I'm going to give you an example of my country. For example, in water, irrigation water or pre-harvest water, the metric set by PrimusGFS is, every sample should show that the levels of E. coli are less than 235 colonies. So when we're auditing, in a regular audit, we check your water test and we check, okay, no presence 100, you're in compliance if you're below 235. But if I'm auditing in Chile we have a specific law for the raspberries. You remember, maybe you don't remember this, but like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Chile has a problem with the raspberries, exported to the United States. We caused an outbreak. I'm sorry. Because of that, Chile, release a specific regulation where it's referred only for the raspberries that any water in contact with the products in between 30 days of harvest, should be free of total coliform. So in this case, we have a more strict guidelines. So when we're auditing in Chile, we expect to see that any water test, of water used in contact with the product 30 days prior to harvest, before harvest, must show compliance against that specific regulation of Chile. If not, it's a downscore in the PrimusGFS checklist. But going back to this question, to achieve compliance in this question, you just need to have a copy of that specific, industry guidelines. Now, if your crop does not have any industry guidelines, in the state or country of production, this question go to NA. It's not applicable. Yeah? Let me see if there's any questions. No. Move to the next one. Okay. I love this question, but probably some of you are not going to love this question. Are all records and test results that can have an impact on the food safety program reviewed and signed off by the person responsible for the food safety program? What means this? This is a question that will be assessed through the whole audit, by the certification body auditor. We're going to see that all type of records, including test results like water testing, product testing, wherever, there's evidence that someone reviewed them and signed them off. Yeah. Examples of those records that should be included. Plant protection products application, pesticide applications, fertilizer application, harvest records, your pre-ops, trainings, wherever, cleaning records. And examples of laboratory tests like water, maximum residue levels, swabs, etc. Now, in a small company, probably this is not a big deal, but I've been talking with people who tell me, Enrique, we're producing over 500, records, per week. Well, I didn't write these guidelines, I'm just a messenger, but it's a fact that is required. Now, who can review that? Of course, the first, requirement should be someone different than the person who complete that record. For example, if we're talking about pesticide application, in the pesticide application, in theory, is the name or the initials or the signature of the applicator. That's fine, yeah? But also, we are going to look for a second signature as evidence of review. That could be, for example, the food safety responsible of the program, or someone from the food safety team, or someone with the proper competence, designated for this. So in other words, someone who really understands what are they reviewing. And I'm going to give you an example of a dramatic case in California many years ago. I was reviewing, swabs, food contact swabs for a facility. So when I was checking, all the binder with the lab results, I was checking, they're testing for Listeria, Salmonella, total plate count, beautiful. And I start flipping pages, and all the results for Listeria were positive. And the producer thought that positive means good. I'm good with Listeria. I'm positive. Oof. What a nightmare. I'm sorry, sir. Your audit is done, and probably you need to start talking with your attorney. Yeah. So the purpose of this question is to prevent such type of things from happening. Now, it's not just enough to have the record. Now, someone must review them. And I'm going to call back, the the food safety, committee and the food safety meetings could be a nice, approach to include all the people of the food safety, committee, the team, as responsible to review this. Yeah. And you can set, let's say once a week, every 2 weeks, a meeting just to review those records. And if there's any issue, of course, document which is a specific corrective action implemented. For example, you're reviewing pesticide application records and an input is missing. For example, the name of the operator. That should trigger, not just to sign off, oh yeah, we found that there's a missing input, missing data in the record. No, you also need to implement corrective actions. What are you going to do to fix that problem and from preventing that from happening again? Yeah. So try to think in the systemic approach instead of the systematic. What I mean with systemic, is to see, the whole program. Systematic is to see step by step. So you can start linking things. For example, you can assign this responsibility, as I told you, to the food safety team. Okay, let me see. I have some questions here from Anne, Anne Jones. Anne from Virginia. I hope so. Hi, Anne. Okay, is this requirement meant to show that all of these records were reviewed prior to the shipment of the finished goods? No. There's no time frame set for that. Yeah. Now, should be a time frame, reasonable. If you're going to say that you're going to review them once a year, no, for sure the auditor is not going to accept that. Should be in a frequency such that allows to detect, if there's any problem. Yeah, in a reasonable time. I have another question from Russell Karner. For small operation where the owner is responsible for food safety activities, who will be able to review and verify records? Good question, Russell. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes, the guidelines usually are written, for generic scenarios. Yeah. So specific scenarios, like, for example, what about a small, family operated ranch farm where the only worker is the grower. Yeah, there's no anybody else. They just, subcontract some people from harvest. In that case, I think it's absolutely understandable to score this question an A, because the person responsible running the program is the person responsible to complete the records, execute all the activities. So there's no sense to ask for that person to review his own work. So in that case, I think it's absolutely acceptable to score this question an A based on the fact there's no any other person working on the farm. Yeah. Or there's no any other person working in the farm with the required competence, to review those records. Yeah. Now, this will be very, very isolated, events. Yeah. Russell, that answers your question. Okay. Let's move to the next one. Okay, the following one is a new question in the standard, but really is not a new requirement if we think in version 2.1. In version 2.1, we have a question about calibration SOPs for any equipment related with food safety. But in the same question, we have at the very end in the interpretation guideline the requirement to have records, to prove that those procedures, those calibration SOPs has been properly implemented. So now they split this into two questions. One question about, the calibration SOPs, and another question related with the calibration records. So they split one question into really no big deal. Yeah, no new things. Yeah, but something, excuse me, something very important to have in mind is required by the standard to identify in a document all the equipments who must be calibrated or verified. I'm going to use two different words, verification and calibration. For example, when you check a wall thermometer that is not possible to calibrate, you check, if the wall thermometer, is working fine, for example, with the classic, ice crush test. So you put the thermometer in a glass, with crushed ice and some water. Yeah. Okay, that is fine. Yeah. But the thing is, you need to also include in the SOP, which is your, going back to verification. You're just verifying if the equipment is working fine or not. If it's out of range, let's say instead of 32 Fahrenheit degrees, when you're putting the thermometer in the crushed ice shows, let's say 25 or 40, degrees, that means that the equipment is out of, calibration, is not accurate, but you cannot calibrate that equipment. Usually you replace the equipment, so you throw that, wall thermometers to the trash and you buy a new one. That should be recorded too. Yeah. Now, calibration is possible for equipments where it's possible to calibrate them, for example, a scale, yeah, or a dial thermometer. Yeah? So keep in mind that in your SOPs, you need to start first. You need to identify all the equipment that should be subject of verification and, when possible, calibration. And you need to explain the method used for this, the acceptable ranges of variation. For example, in a thermometer, could be acceptable 1 + 1 - 1 Fahrenheit degree. You decide that, but should be something reasonable. You cannot put +10 - 10. Yeah. And then during, the recording part of this, you need to identify, the original, number letter given by the verification. And then you need to write the corrective action, include the corrective action. The corrective action, if the equipment is out of calibration, is or to calibrate the equipment if it's possible, or to dispose of, that equipment if it's not possible to be calibrated. Yeah. So don't forget to detail that. It's not just to put scales, the scale used for plant protection products measurement, calibrated on May 15. No, that's not enough. You need to include, which was the result of the verification, and include the corrective action if the equipment was out of calibration. Yeah. Okay, let me see if they have any other question. I see a lot of comments popping up in the chat. Okay, no technical questions. Okay, equipment to keep in mind at farm level, yeah, sprayers, yeah, spreaders, scales that you use for plant protection products measurement, yeah, the glasses too, yeah, thermometers if you're using them. Yes, sir?
There is a question from Edgar about...
Oh, yes, I just saw it popping up. Okay, Edgar asked, have temperature calibration ever been inspected in transportation in specific reefer trailers? Also, if so, where and who keeps these records? Okay, first we're talking about GMPs now. You're talking about, shipping trailers. If that is the case, if those reefers are not handled by your company, in other words, they're sent by the buyer, this is out of scope. You just need to check in the GMPs. There's a question that you check the temperature in the reefer, yeah, or in the trailer, nothing else. You are not responsible to calibrate or to verify, and if needed, calibrate equipment who are not part of your legal responsibility. Yeah, Edgar, that answers your question? I hope so. If not, we can go back to this later. Okay, new question. Very, very brand new question. Food fraud vulnerability assessment. Why this new question? This is not a GFSI requirement. This is part of the produce safety rule. Yeah. Okay, a food fraud vulnerability assessment and protection plan. So in this case, we have two branches in this requirement. First, a risk assessment against food fraud vulnerability, and then your mitigation plan, how you reduce the risk of those identified risks. Now, the first thing that I'm going to tell you, this is not biosecurity, this is not biodefense, this is different. And I'm going to show you a picture that's going to speak by itself. Well, what you need to consider here, for example, chemicals. Pesticides, fertilizers, cleaning chemicals, packaging material if you're packing in the field. We're talking about the GAP part of the standard. And outgoing could be shipping trucks, But what are we looking for here? And let me show you the next picture. Can you see that Coca-Cola bottle? Haha, what the heck is there? Okay, incoming materials to consider. Chemicals like pesticides, fertilizers, cleaning chemicals, packaging material if you're packing, in your harvest process. Raw materials, ingredients, yeah, if you're using any ingredient. So, going back to this Coca-Cola bottle, I took this picture a long time ago in South America. When I was inspecting a pesticide, storage, I found that Coca-Cola bottle. And they have a handwritten label saying paraquat. Who can assure that that product is paraquat? So I started talking with the grower, yeah, and he explained me that he lives in a very small town and there's no places to buy pesticides. So the grocery, the only grocery of the town, was selling pesticides in Coca-Cola bottles. Even more, they have the requirement that you must bring your own bottle. Now, how you can be sure that first, that chemical is paraquat? Second, How you can be sure that that product has not been diluted with water? Economic fraud. So this is what is targeting this new question. A risk assessment, assessing the potential risk of food fraud, from, for example, pesticide, fertilizers, wherever, yeah? And how you mitigate them. And now thinking the systemic approach that I referred before. What about if you make reference to your supplier monitoring program? You remember section 106 in the FSMS in module 1? Yes, that could work if, for example, in your supplier monitoring program for this type of, suppliers, you have included that, for example, they should be formal suppliers, yeah, not like the grocery that I just told you, yeah. And one of the food safety requirement for them is to provide the pesticide, for example, in enclosed containers, sealed and with a label. Yeah, so you can link the mitigation plan with your supplier monitoring program, if your supplier monitoring program has that level of detail. Yeah. Okay, I have Edgar. I see this is okay. Yes, Edgar, I know what you mean. Okay, so any questions about food fraud? Yeah, so don't forget, identify thinking economically motivated fraud. For example, a supplier trying to sell you something that is not really what you think that you're buying. Yeah, for example, this example of the pesticide bottle. Yeah. Now I know that this is not something that happens in the United States, but please think on the spirit of this question. And I think this example is a very graphic one of what do you need to keep in mind. Yeah. Let me see if there's any question or comments about this. By the way, there's a lot of, examples of forms or spreadsheets in the internet for food fraud, risk assessment and mitigation plans. But I've seen that a lot of them are very complex. So keep in mind that it depends on the complexity of your operation, the level of detail, that you should have in this mitigation plan. In this food fraud mitigation plan. Now, usually, in this session, we're talking about, farms, harvest crews. So usually there's not too many concern as, in a processing facility that we need to put ingredients, a lot of things, yeah? Something else to consider in this food fraud, mitigation plan is, outgoing materials. In the case of a GAP operation, I mean, for example, ranch and harvest crew, your concern should be, the shipping trucks, the vehicle used to transport the product from your farm to wherever you're shipping that product, a packer, cold storage, etc. And I'm going to give you an example of what I've seen that happens in some countries. In my country, in Chile, the producer ships, packed product from the fields to their buyer, to an exporting company. But the truck driver decides to stop at the girlfriend house, at the family house, and he or she tell them, hey, I have free blueberries for you guys. Pick wherever you want. That's a problem of fraud in shipping. So you, in one or another way, should control that. Now, it depends on the risk, what you need to implement. I'm not saying that you need to lock your shipments. But for example, it could be a good idea to refer in your mitigation plan that you're recording in your shipping documents, the plate of the truck and the name of the driver. Yeah, that could be enough depending the risk. Now, if we're in Chile, probably it should be something more, in depth, like sealed reefers, or if it's an open trailer, they record the time where they depart from the farm and they arrive, to the destiny of the product, to see if the times make sense. In other words, that the truck was not missing for 3 hours or 4 hours. Where do you know was that truck? Maybe in the girlfriend house, offering, free products. Okay. Next and last new question in the FSMS. Really, it's a new question. Yeah. Let me see if there's any questions. No. Okay, I have a question here from Edgar. Risk that product is touching the wall, the walls and floor. Isn't this a direct and indirect food contact surface? Shouldn't this be part of the scoring system? But Edgar, this is not part of food fraud. We're going to talk about this, in the evenings, in the afternoon session. Yeah. But don't forget something. The one who decides who is a food contact surface is not me, it's not you, it's the government, So any surface, including hand tools that can contact the product, or any surface who can, for example, leak, water from condensation over products, is considered a food contact surface. Yeah? Now, there's no specific question about that in the transport section, in the PrimusGFS standard. Now you can address this in your risk assessment. Yeah? Anyway. That is more related with the GMPs, the good manufacturing practices. Yeah. Okay, let's go over this question. 10803. You remember that in version 2.1 we have a question about the food defense plan. Yeah. And it was just a food defense plan, and several of them, make reference, to recording, the names, a log for visitors, subcontractors, having, on file the name of all the workers, etc., etc. Some of them very sophisticated cameras, guards, a fence around the compound or around the farm, wherever. Yeah. That is still the same compliance criteria, but now we have this new requirement clearly written, because it's not just to write, how you're going to prevent, any issues with food defense. You also need to implement that. For example, if you said that you're going to have a fence around the farm, well, it's not just paper, to achieve compliance. We have to see that fence. So because of that, this new question target that any record associated with food defense plan, for example, if your food defense plans make reference to a visitor log, makes reference to training of your staff in food defense, we expect to see those records. Yeah. By the way, this was implicit in version 2.1, but it was not written. Yeah. So as any risk assessment, if I see a risk assessment and you propose A, B, or C measures to mitigate that risk, we expect to see evidence as far as possible, of the implementation of those measures. But in this case, now we have a specific question. So very common in food defense plans to address that all the workers of the company will be trained in food defense. In other words, mostly in how to deal with people who are not authorized to be in the farm or in the harvest crew area. Yeah. Hey, if you see someone, who is not part of the crew, please notify your supervisor, for example. Okay. Now you need to have that record showing that the workers were trained, in food defense. In other words, in how to deal, for example, with people who should not be there. And that's all for the FSMS. Any question about the FSMS? As you see, no major surgery. I think in terms of work, the most important question is the one about the review of all the food safety records, especially, in big companies, that's going to give you a nice burden of work. Yeah. In small operations should not be something so complicated in terms of time, to invest on this. But I'm going to put something in your mind. If you review a record and something in that record could be used as in further references in a lawsuit, for example, you could be liable because you review them. So please don't do the classic South American technical general manager of a company just flipping the corner of the pages and signing. Because when you put your signature there, it's evidence that you reviewed them. So if there's any problem in that document and after there's an outbreak and the issue was related or was part of the evidence or the source of that problem was evident in that record, you could be liable. Yeah? So please, it's not just to sign, it's to review them and understanding, what are you reviewing? So think about the person or the people that will be responsible of this review. Yeah, should be people competent that they know what they're reviewing. Not like in this example that I gave you of the producer where, he has a lot of hits of positive in the swaps and he thought that positive was fine. Yeah. Okay, Matt?
Yes. I just thought this would be a good time. Since we're going into the next module for a little bit of housekeeping, we've had like 20 people come on or more since we first started this. If anybody has any questions, please chat it. And then whatever, if you're worried about what you missed so far, we're going to be sending out a recording at tomorrow to everybody that signed up for this webinar. So that's it. Go ahead and keep going with your questions. Enrique will be checking on it occasionally and answering it as we go. Thank you, guys. Oh, and we still have a little bit. Oh, my audio keeps going. We still have probably another hour and a half left of this training that Enrique has created here. So
yeah, about 1 hour and 1 hour and a half. Yeah.
perfect. Okay. Thank you, guys.
If someone has problem with, I have someone here in the chat saying that the audio keeps coming in and out. So problems with the audio. Is any else of you has a problem with the audio? By default, only people with yes. Norma, seems that you're the only one. Probably it's a problem of your internet, speed. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, you're going to have the recording of this session, and you're going to enjoy my lovely accent again. Okay. I'm sorry for my accent, folks. Huh? Okay, let's go from module 2. Just give me a second. Let me grab something that I just dropped. Okay. Farm module 2. Why they changed the name from ranch to farm? The explanation is in the new farm definition. Yeah. Okay. In the past, since the very first version of PrimusGFS, and for the people who was before that using the Primus standard audit, we have that written stone definition about contiguous growing area. So some people who has, let's say 2 operations, and they were, let's say, half mile one from the other one, they have 2 ranches, 2 operations, 2 audit, 2 invoices. So PrimusGFS changed a little bit the definition, not as much as we would like to group non-contiguous growing areas. Let me explain you this new definition. The farm definition: a tract of land, not necessarily a lot for production purposes, under common management, no big deal with that, and common water supply, key words. Ideally contiguous, but if non-contiguous, and note the word ideal. Every time that you see the word ideal or ideally in the guidelines of the standard, means it's a good thing that you can do. But it's not mandatory to do that. In other words, there's no reason, for example, for a down score in any question where there's some reference to any ideal situation. Give me a second. I have a question here. Sally Granal, would you please restate the part about surveillance? Udi. Sally, the short thing about the surveillance audit. Under version 3, not version 2.1. If you're currently certified in version 2.1, forget the thing. In version 3, there's a new regulation that the certification body must choose at least 2% of the certificates given in version 3 for unannounced inspection. So don't be surprised if your certification body contacts you in regards surveillance audit, but you could be chosen only if you are certified under version 3. Yeah. If you reject 2 times, the second time that you reject the surveillance audit, the certificate will be suspended. Okay, this is not, a decision of the certification body in terms of this program. It's a new rule. Now, how certification bodies should choose, the people for surveillance audit is related it's not a random selection. It's related with, for example, complaints. If you're involved with an outbreak, your historical, compliance, in your audits, etc. So, in other words, certification bodies should choose operations where there's a significant risk in terms of food safety for this program. Yeah. But don't forget this: if you're chosen, you can reject this only 1 time under a good reason, not because you're tired or you don't want to receive it because you want to see a TV show. No. It's because you are not there, you're sick, there's a natural disaster, that's that type of things. So based on that, the certification body will follow up, in a second attempt to conduct the surveillance audit. But if you reject the second attempt, the certificate will be suspended. Yeah. Let me see if there's any other question. Okay. So going back to the farm definition. So the good news is now in some scenarios could be possible to group as just one farm, just one inspection, non-contiguous growing areas. But the key condition is common management. Yes, in theory, it's with the same company, it's the same person or team responsible of the food safety program, but common water supply. That's the key, Sorry, I have Sally again. What about scoring on surveillance audit? The surveillance audit is exactly the same as your official audit. The scoring is exactly the same. Yeah, potentially some questions could be an A because the practices are not occurring, but you're going to receive a result. If you achieve less than 85%, you're going to be suspended, or if you are in the preliminary report, or as after corrective actions, if you don't achieve at least a 90% of in the overall score and 85% of compliance per each one of the applicable modules, that will lead, to a suspension of your certificate. In other words, a surveillance audit is exactly the same as, the official audit conducted by the certification body. Same checklist, same scoring, same questions, etc. Yeah. The only thing that could complicate this a little bit is the fact that in a surveillance audit, if it's conducted off-season, less questions will be applicable. So any downscore, during the surveillance audit will have a significant impact in your overall score. Why? Because there's less applicable points. Yeah. Okay, going back to the farm definition. I'm going to show you examples of when it's possible and when not possible to group non-contiguous growing areas. Yeah. In the first, I have two examples is when it's possible to group non-contiguous growing areas. For these examples, I sent an email to the standard owner, to Azul. I gave them, these scenarios, and they replied to me. So please, this is not my my interpretation of this definition. It's the standard owner definition. So if the standard owner says that, we follow that. Okay, two examples when it's possible to group them. Two non-contiguous ranches. It doesn't matter the distance. Two non-contiguous ranches, but both use the same well for agricultural water and have similar risk, in terms of the crop. For example, one grows lettuce, the other one grows spinach, the growing area itself, and the adjacent land. For example, these two growing areas, these two ranches are surrounded by other ranches growing similar crops. In that case, if both ranches only use one well and that well sources water for the both, branches or growing areas for all type of pre-harvest water use, like irrigation, pesticide applications, fertilizers application, etc. Any type of pre-harvest water, you can group them. Yeah. Now, could be more than one ranch. Let's say that you have a central well and you have 5, growing areas non-contiguous around, but that well is the main water source for all of them. Yes, you can group them in one farm. Yeah. Now, another example. Two non-contiguous ranches, both use water from the same canal district, same irrigation district, even with different pumps. Yeah, according to the standard owner, it's possible to group them. Yeah. So here we have two scenarios. When it's possible to group, two non-contiguous growing areas. Now, the following three examples is when it's not possible to group them. For example, two non-contiguous ranches and each one have an independent well for agricultural water. I'm sorry, it's not the same water source, so two different operations, two different audits, two different invoices. I'm sorry. The other scenario, two non-contiguous ranches, but both use water from the same canal district, so same irrigation district, but have different risk in the adjacent land. For example, ranch number 1 is surrounded by other ranches growing similar crops, and ranch number 2 is surrounded by other growing areas and a feedlot. The feedlot is the key. In the adjacent land, we have different risks. So in that case, even if they're using the same water source, it's not possible to group them because of the risk in the adjacent land. Okay? And the third example, two non-contiguous ranches, but both use water from the same river, but from different irrigation districts, so different water management organization. In that case, it's not possible to group them. Yeah. Okay, so this explains why they changed the name from ranch to farm. Why? Because the ranch definition is not from PrimusGFS, it's from the USDA, contiguous growing area. So they decided to change the name from ranch to farm to allow this grouping of non-contiguous growing areas or ranches. Yeah, that explains the new name. Yeah. Now, really, because of the definition and the reference to the common water source, in other words, the same. I'm sorry, will be not something that is going to happen a lot, to group non-contiguous growing area because of the deal of the water sources. Yeah. Any questions so far about this definition? Let me see. Here I have Adrian Rainier. Hey, Adrian, how are you? I have a question from Adrian. What about if the farms are growing the same product, same water source, but are leased? No restriction about Adrian, but they should be using the same water source. For example, if it's a well, and that well source water for irrigation, for plant protection products application, fertilizers, even dust abatement. If it's only one well for 3, 4, 5 ranches, yeah, yes, you can group them in just one, yeah. Now, if you have 2 wells and one well source for 2 ranches and the other 2 for 2 ranches, maybe you can have 2 groupings, of 2 growing areas for a final number of 2 operations, 2 farm audits, yeah. But the list is not a concern, yeah. It's not something that impacts, this decision of group or not to group. Now, don't forget that you're going to refer this during the application, but the last say is in the hands of the auditor. So even if you group them, several non-contiguous growing area in one farm, but during the inspection, the auditor noted something different, the auditor could revert this to several operations, and there will be your call to accept or not that, yeah? When I mean to accept or not, if you want to continue the audit or with just one, farm, or you're going to include all of them, your call. You decide the scope of the audit in PrimusGFS, but we, as auditors, we must follow those, regulations, yeah? Okay. Okay, Travis Banks has another question. When you say group then, do you mean they will be under one farm audit? Yes, Travis. Yes, Travis. If there's 3 growing areas, non-contiguous, and all of them, use only one well for agricultural water, for pre-harvest water, yes, it's only one farm. Yeah, so it's only one operation, one farm audit, one invoice, one certificate. Yeah. New stuff in the module. These comments apply for module 2, 3, and 4. Harvest crew, greenhouse, and harvest crew. Good news. In the past, we have yes or no, or you comply or you don't comply, with the requirements of each and every of the questions of the checklist. But now it's different. Now we have, partial, compliance. We can answer, if there's something missing, against a requirement, there's a mistake, the auditor could decide to score a major, a minor, or a non-conformance. And this makes a lot of sense. Several times, auditing, for example, I found that one hand washing station was out of soap, out of paper towels, for example. And that means, according, version 2.1, a non-compliance, because you're not in compliance, 100% in compliance with expectation. But that was not fair. Why? Because maybe you have 10 hand washing stations and only one was out of scope of paper towels. And if we compare this with a producer where all the hand washing stations were out of, paper towels, it's not fair to give them the same non-conformance. So now we can impose, for example, in this scenario, a minor. Let's say that you have 10 hand washing stations and one of them is out of stock of paper towel, well, the auditor sure is going to score a minor. In other words, the issues, are going to impact not as hard as in the past, the scoring of the question, and by default, the scoring of the section and the overall score of the audit, yeah? The other thing is that the questions were calibrated through the modules, so they are the same, as similar as possible between modules. There was a lot of questions, for example, who are exactly the same in the farm and in the harvest crew audit, but for example, in the harvest crew audit was an automatic failure, and in the ranch was just a non-conformance. Now they calibrated this, yeah? Same with the scoring. Same question in the harvest crew and in the farm module in the past, or the ranch module in the past. One has, 10 points, exactly the same question. The other one, 5 points. Now they put the same scoring for both. Yeah? Makes sense. Let me see if there's any question. Okay. Let's go over the new questions in the farm module. In the farm module, really, there's no major surgery, in version 2.1, but there's a few new questions, some of them, because of the GFSI requirements, and other ones because of the produce safety rule. And this one is because of the produce safety rule, yeah? This question is going to bring the artist in you. Is there a map that shows all aspects of the operation, including water sources? Yeah, so it's a classical map showing the breakdown of the different growing blocks, showing the water sources, where they're located, yeah? Location of permanent water fixtures, like, for example, pumps, filtering system, and the flow of the water system. But read the flow of the water system more than to put arrows showing, from where to where flows the water. The main purpose of this is to identify which blocks, which areas, serve that water source. Yeah. I'm going to show you an example. Here we have, a fictitious map for good farmer farm map. First, we have, the breakdown of the lots. Here we have 5 lots, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1 to 4 grows apples, 5 grows lettuce. And we have 3 water sources. We have a reservoir, we have well number 1 and well number 2. Also, we're identifying, the buildings. One is the office, the other one is the storage. Yeah. Instead to use arrows, because arrows could be somewhat confusing to show which specific blocks serves, or areas serve each one of the water sources, I did a chart. For example, well number 1, the purpose is plant protection and fertilizers application. The third column, please, this is not required for PrimusGFS. This example was for the produce safety rule. If the water contacts of not the crop. So just observing this map and reading this chart, we know that well number 1 is using in all the blocks. Why? Because the grower pulls water for fertilizers and pesticide application from well number 1. In the case of well number 2, it's used only for lettuce, irrigation, and fertigation. So we know that well number 2 serves only lot number 5. And reservoir number 1, apples irrigation. In this case, we know that we have 4 blocks with apples. So we know that reservoir number 1 source water for irrigation for lot number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Something like this is what you must implement. Now it could be a Google Maps picture, where you write over it, you identify where are the water sources. You can put arrows to show where, or which areas and serves, that water source, or you can have a chart. But in other words, this document should show, to the auditor during the inspection, where the water sources, where the pumps, filtering systems, and the most important part, which specific blocks serves those water sources. Yeah. Now, this is something very practical. Let's say that you have an unsuitable water result in well number 2. Let's say that, you pull, a water sample for testing and show that you have 500 E. coli colonies, per 100 mLs. You know that you have a problem there, so you need to implement a corrective action, yeah? Correct the problem, if it's a well, for example, the classic 7 steps, for wells disinfection, choking with them with chlorine, and then you need to retest. But also, it's not just enough as a corrective action. If that water, contact the product, you need to also test the product. So with this map, you and the auditor will know that if there's any concern about product contamination, will be only in lot number 5, product lettuce. Why? Because through the map, we know that well number 2 only, serves, water for irrigation for lot number 5. Yeah. So it's very practical to have this. Yeah. And you have this probably, just your map, showing, the breakdown of your crops, blocks, etc. But you just need to add the thing about the water sources. Yeah. Okay. Let me see if there's any question. Okay. Let's continue. 20203. For the people who has experience in PrimusGFS version 2.1 and 1.6, this question is very familiar. Why? Because this question was pulled from the GMP part of the standard, from the facility part of the audit. This is a visual assessment, no documents required. Is the exterior area immediately outside the growing area, including roads, yards, and parking areas, free of litter, weeds, and standing water? So this is a visual assessment observing that there are no excessive weeds. Yeah, there's no standing water. Special attention with standing water. Water is an excellent media to grow bacteria. So if you have water, temperature, for sure, organic matter, that is a perfect place to grow bacteria. Yeah. The guidelines make reference to excessive weeds and grass. Yeah, visual assessment that there's no excess of them that can harbor pests like rodents. Yeah, there should be no excessive standing water and or foul-smelling odors. And if there is a designated smoking area outside of the cigarette area, outside of the growing area, there should be a can, something as a cigarette butt collector to prevent the workers to throw the cigarette butts to the ground. Yeah. And the car parking area should be free from litter, cigarette butts, etc. Yeah? Just a visual assessment. So if everything looks clean around your growing area, you're in compliance. Yeah? 20204. Another question who came from the GMPs, another visual assessment. There should be control measures being implemented, for the outside storage of equipment, pallets, tires, etc., what we call the boneyard. Yeah. Now, if there's no such type of storage areas in the farm, in the ranch, of course, it's an A. But I'm not sure why some producer has that emotional relation with old equipment, tractor from 1920. They think that they're going to pull spare parts from them. No, probably not. So if you decide to keep a boneyard, in your farm, this area is a potential harborage, for pests, and the rules refer that the equipment should be stored at least 10 centimeters, that means 4 inches off the ground, for example, over pallets, and the grower should check the store equipment periodically to ensure that it's not become a pest harborage area or dirt due to rain. So there's no documents required here. This is a recommendation for the grower. We, during the inspection, if there's such type of, yards, with a bone yard, we're going to inspect if everything is off the ground, not in the mud, and also there's no evidence of pest, harborage, like rodents, birds nesting, that type of things. The guidelines make reference to inventory checks, but this is not requesting you to have a written inventory. It's just to assess, as a recommendation from you as the auditee, to assess from time to time if you're not keeping too much old steel, too much old equipment and other stuff. That could become a concern in terms of pest harborage. Again, visual, no documents required. Another question who comes from the GMPs, garbage receptacles, dumpster, trash cans, etc. Another visual assessment. All dumpster and garbage receptacles should have a cover and be kept covered to prevent the attraction of insects, rodents, and other pests. A fine mesh lid is acceptable, but just having the lid is not, acceptable if they're not using them. For example, if there's a lid but the lid is open, no. Think in the purpose, in the spirit of this requirement, is to prevent the pest having access to those, trash or garbage receptacles. I mean, birds, rodents, etc. Yeah. Now, any type of garbage receptacle used only for dry non-food waste like paper, cardboard is exempt from this requirement. So if you have two types of dumpsters, one for organic, wet, garbage, yes, it should be covered. But if you have another one for, let's say, packaging material, wood, plastic, wherever, that one is exempt from this requirement. Okay. New question, but really this is not a new requirement. Where soil, substrates, or fertilizers like compost, like manure, are stored or handled, there should be measures in place to ensure seepage and runoff is collected or diverted and does not reach growing areas, product, or any of the water sources of the farm. So this is nothing related with document. It's again a visual assessment. First, if you have not such type, of storage areas, in your farm or close to or they're very away from the growing areas, you're in compliance. Yeah. Now the problem is when you have, for example, a compost pile close to the growing areas, where exists the chance of the contamination of the growing area by those materials. For example, after a rain, water, going inside of the growing area contaminated with these materials. Think about this as a fecal contamination finding. Really, in any audit in the past, if an auditor observed such type of things, he could use, a question about fecal contamination of the growing area, to fail the audit. But this is the same, it's the same purpose. The problem is not the feces. The problem is the bacteria. Could be, by animal feces or by the storage of this type of materials. Yeah. So if you have such type of storage, areas in the farm, the auditor is going to inspect that there's no potential, runoff of those materials to the growing area. I have a couple of pictures to show you as an example. In the picture in your left, first we have, in between, two growing areas, we have these big piles of compost. And if you see the picture, there's a lot of, standing water around them. So probably, the day before was raining. So in this case, there's a potential access of these liquids into the growing area. This could lead to a fail of the inspection. Of course, the auditor should have in mind, and this comment is not just for this question. In any automatic failure, usually an automatic failure is not just one fact. We need to put a lot of different facts together to decide based on risk, is this an automatic failure or not. If this situation in the picture on the left happens during the dormant period of the crop, in this case the orchard, the trees, so there's no product exposed, and through the records we can check that the material was brought during the dormant period of the trees and then applied during the dormant period of the tree or the commencing of the season, the risk is minor. But if this is happening during harvest season, no, we have a problem. And of course, it's not the same apples than lettuce, like the example in the picture on the right. If you see here, we have another, let's say that is compost or manure, pile store, very close to this ground crop, leafy greens. In this case, they have a fence, it's a barbed wire fence. Do you think that this is enough to prevent, the runoff of these materials when it's raining, to prevent the access of this contaminated runoff water, inside of the growing area? No. In this case, 99% sure that will be an automatic failure, unless there's a ditch to divert, the potential runoff of the liquids of these materials. But even that, think about something else. What about contamination by wind? This is very close. Does not look a good idea. Maybe, it's very probably during inspection, if we observe such type of things during harvest season, that when we usually conduct the inspection, the auditor could decide to fail the audit too, because the potential, contamination by dust moving, dust contaminated with E. coli, salmonella, wherever, from the pile to the growing area. So don't forget, it's distance, or if you don't have enough room to put these materials away from the growing area, you need to have physical barriers. And one of the most important things is to think in the potential runoff of liquids from those materials to the growing area. New question, yeah, but this is an old question for the people who has been using Global GAP. This question came from Global GAP, 20207, whether fill station for fuel or pesticide, is it evident that the location and or use is not a risk of contamination to the product, water sources, growing areas, equipment, for example, the sprayers and farm equipment, in a yard, and packaging materials. Again, here we have two chances to deal with this, or distance, and if not distance, physical barriers. And here I have an example for the fuel, containers. In the picture, on the top, you can see that the fuel tank is surrounded by a wall. So in case of any spills, in theory, the fuel will be contained inside of this kind of swimming pool, a pool. But also it's possible to make reference when the fuel containers are double tank. No, that is not possible, to be seen, visually observing the tank. But the tanks usually has this type of plate. If you see in this example, I took this picture from a tank, the bronze plate, aside of it. It says double wall. That is acceptable too. Double wall is acceptable for the case of fuel containers. Now, we extrapolate this for pesticide, filling areas. If there's any filling or loading areas, close to the crop, you need to implement physical barriers to contain potential spills of those materials, onto the growing area. Of course, you need to think it's not the same if you're using backpack sprayers than if you're using, a sprayer with a tank of 500 gallons. So depending the volumes that you handle should be, the physical measures that you implement to prevent to contain those potential spills. Again, visual assessment. There's no document required in this question. Let me see if there's any other question. Okay, The following three questions are existing questions. You remember that very old question of there's animal presence in the growing area. Then if there's animal presence, if this presence in the form of fecal matter. And the third one, if it was a systematic problem of fecal, events in the growing area, automatic failure of the audit. The change in this question is not just the growing area. They increase the scope of this question to the audited area. So this is covering the whole farm, including, for example, storages, the yard where you keep the equipment, your plows, your work, sprayers, etc. Yeah. Now a tip. Yeah, imagine that there's any finding, in a specific area of fecal matter. Yeah. If that is the case, and you just noted that at the time of the CB inspection, you can say, hey, 1 second, I have an SOP for this. You remember that SOP that's still in the standard about isolating, any affected area by, for example, fecal contamination, and even more. You have an SOP in the FSMS to put our growing areas on hold when something happens. If you execute that SOP in front of the auditor at the time of the finding, the auditor should score question 20208A in compliance. And even if there was a finding of fecal matter, your audit is not going to fail. Now, for this, you need to implement this in 2 seconds. Okay, there's 3 dog poop in this area. Okay, give me just 1 second, and let's say that you're using flags to isolate, growing areas. You go, put your red flags, isolate the area, then later you complete your NOCA form, because it's an unusual incident, and you implement the non-harvest area in that section, clean, dispose of the product, and done. That is acceptable. Now, if during inspection we found 1, 2, 3, no. That's not acceptable. Why? Because you should have noted that before. It's not an isolated event. It's systematic in different parts of the, the audited area. Yeah. So don't forget that the increase of the scope of this question is to the audited area. New question, but probably this question will be applicable very, very few times. If you remember, in version 2.1, we have a question about floodings from uncontrolled water sources of the growing area. And we have what we call daughter question. If there's a flooding in the growing area, the following question becomes applicable. We have a question about isolating the area, non-harvesting the product, that was potentially affected by that, flooding. But we have a new question here, a new daughter question. If this is a conditional question, first, if there's a flooding, and second, if you have in the farm septic or sewage system adjacent to the growing area and they were affected by the flood water, there should be a documented inspection after flooding to assure that these, for example, septic tanks are not overflowing. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, you don't need to hire someone special for this. A plumber. No. You can do that by yourself, but you need to document, how looks, your septic system or your sewage, system to assure that there's no overflowing and they're functioning properly. That's all. Now, if there's no flooding or there's no such type of system in your farm, and hey, in other words, if you're using portable toilets, forget this question. This is an existing question in version 2.1. The risk assessment covering everything from planting up to harvest. Now they increased this question, of this very big risk assessment to a Codex HACCP style risk assessment. Now it's not just to identify, the area of concern and the mitigation measures. Now you need to add, the likelihood to occur of the problem, the specific chemical, biological, or physical risk, for example, E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella for biological risk, the severity, the combination of the likelihood to occur and the severity means the significance. And if it's significant, something that is really important, you need to include, in this document or in a second document, which measures you implement to prevent or control or mitigate, use the word what you prefer, to mitigate, to reduce or control that risk. Yeah? And because of that, we have this new question, a daughter question. If any risk is identified, and this means, of course, a significant risk, an important risk, corrective actions and or preventive measure being documented and implemented. So, for example, if you in your risk assessment, when you're in the section of adjacent land, you identify there's, for example, potential wildlife animal intrusion. Yeah, makes sense, very common. You need to set which are your mitigation measures to deal with that risk. Could be something as sophisticated as fences. I'm going to put a 6-foot fence around my growing area, but let's talk with the reality. That costs a lot of money. And sometimes, it's significant, but it's not it's not, a lot of animals in the growing area. Yeah. So in that case, you can make reference to other measures. For example, your SOP to put areas on hold. You can make reference of visual monitoring of the area, looking for signs of animal intrusion, etc. Or using, sound devices to keep animals away. I've seen many, many different methods to deal with this type of risk. But don't forget, it's not just to identify the risk in the risk assessment. For any significant risk, you need to set your mitigation measures. And then there should be evidence when it's a physical, mitigation measure, that those mitigation measures have been implemented. If you put fences around the growing area, well, where are those fences? Yeah? If you make reference to a document, for example, your SOP to isolate, affected areas, and plus a policy or SOP for monitoring the growing areas, yes, we will ask for those documents to assure that what you set as a mitigation measure in your risk assessment has been properly implemented. Yeah. Okay. New question. Yeah, inventories. The following one is a chemical inventory logs for chemicals, including pesticides and fertilizers. Yes, this is a paperwork, it's a document requirement. You will need to keep inventories of your chemicals, including pesticides, fertilizers, cleaning chemicals. Yeah. The minimum frequency for the inventory checks, that means, you need to document inventories at least monthly during production season. In off-season, outdoor discretion applies. So, for example, if your season runs for 6 months, we expect to see 6 inventories. Yeah, at least 6 inventories. Now, several times the storages are not in the farm, and don't forget that PrimusGFS only inspect what is into the frame of the audited area, the farm. So someone can say, well, this is not an A because my storage is 2 miles away from here. But look the last part of the slideshow, and a copy should be maintained separate from the chemical storage. So even if the storage is not in place and you have a beautiful clipboard, hanging from the wall, yeah? I have a question here. Give me a second, Adrian. Yeah. So even if you have a clipboard hanging from the wall with your monthly inventories, you need to have a copy at the place where the audit is being conducted to show evidence of compliance with this. Okay, I have a question from Adrian Rainier. 20402, not an information question. 20402, let me look for that one. I don't have this question in the slideshow, Adrian. If you want, we can check, this one is not an old question. Remind me, this is the one about the organic certificates. I don't have the checklist, in the slideshow. So, well, we can check this later, Adrian, yeah? And by the way, you have me in Skype. You can call me whenever you want, yeah? Okay, so let's move to the next one, just because 20402, no, it's not here. Give me a second. No, I don't have this one in the 204, really? We can check that at the end of the slideshow, Adrian, yeah? Okay. Next question. Again, targeting, chemical storage. They should be stored securely. That means, in a place without access to the people, with a lock, with a key, a padlock, safely, and are they labeled correctly? That refers to containers. Now, the key word here is chemicals located on site. So, if your storage for this type of chemicals is not in the audited area, is not in the farm, we go to an A. But if it's there, there should be evidence that the access to the chemical is controlled. So the only way to prove, evidence of compliance against that is secure. Yeah. Only workers who understand the risk involved and have and have been trained properly are allowed to access these chemicals. So we're going to ask who are the key holders, for example, of the storage, where you keep all your fertilizers, your pesticides. And then we're going to check if the people, the person who are the key holders are properly trained, in regard to risk, and the handling of those, items. Yeah. And the storage area should be located away from any raw material, packaging, and finished food products. Now, spill control should be in place for open and used containers. So the following requirements, the spill barriers to contain, potential spills are only applicable, for liquid containers who are open. So think about this. There have been very sophisticated methods to deal with this in other programs like Global GAP, like the floor is with a slope to the center that finish in a collection pit. Yeah, of course, that is going to work. But what about if you have a few open containers and you put them inside of a PVC tray? Yeah. If the tray is able to contain the product, the volumes, in those containers, yes, that is going to work. Yeah. And the last part of this, requirements, empty containers should be stored and disposed of safely. But I'm going to do an exclusion in this question. In the pesticide section, we have a specific question with the same type of requirements and even more things, for the plant protection product storage. So really, when we're auditing, a farm, if there's a storage devoted only for plant protection products, we're going to address that not in this question. In the specific question about, pesticide storage and empty container storage in the pesticide usage section, yeah? So this other one could apply, for cleaning chemicals, for fertilizers, etc. There's some overlapping in the standard in different questions. And don't forget something, auditors are trained to avoid the double dinging. What means this? Double dinging means downscoring more than one question with just one finding. For example, if I'm inspecting your pesticide storage and there's no spill control barriers for your open, liquid containers, I'm going to downscore only and probably a deviation, a minor or a major, in the pesticide, storage, question, not in this one, to give you two downscores by the same fact, the same finding. 20504. Another question will come from the GMP world. Are food grade and non-food grade chemicals used appropriately according to the label and stored in a controlled manner? Total compliance. The 99% of the weight of this question will be based in the storage of food grade and non-food grade chemicals. And in this case, thinking lubricants, thinking cleaning chemicals. For example, you can have chlorine, to clean, pure chlorine to disinfect, harvest tools, but maybe you have another bottle of chlorine with perfume, with flowers potpourri. That one is non-food grade, so they should be stored segregated to prevent, transfer of use, using the one with fragrance, for example, to disinfect clippers. I have a question here. Yuridia Gonzalez, we lost our internet. This presentation will be sent us later. Yes, Yuridia. Matt is going to send, the recording of this session, probably in between today and tomorrow to all of you, all the people who is registered in this session. Yeah. So you're going to enjoy my beautiful accent as many times as you want. Yeah. I know that Adrienne Rainier is laughing by her, to herself about my comment. Or no, Adrienne? Okay. The other part of this, new question is to use these chemicals, for example, sanitation chemicals according the label. And we're going to check that through the records, For example, if you're using quaternary ammoniums, to disinfect, let's say, a packing table, used by the harvest crew, we expect to see that your SOPs prove that you're following the dosification, recommended by the product label. Yeah? But don't forget, the 99% of the weight of this question is segregation in between food grade and non-food grade. Now, ideally, two different storages, but if you use the same storage, you need to segregate them physically. For example, you can have a shelf for food grade and another shelf for non-food grade with a clear posting showing, hey, these are the food grade chemicals, these are not. Okay, new question. This question came from the GMPs, the Good Manufacturing Practices module. This is a very open question that allows to impose an automatic failure by, for example, issues with product contamination. At the crop, ingredients, but look this, including water. Attention with this, including water, food contact packaging, clamshells, bags, wherever, and food contact surfaces, for example, clippers, knives, packing tables, within accepted tolerance for spoilage and free from adulteration. This is a visual assessment. Yeah. So, for example, if we observe, an issue with food contact packaging, for example, several droppings of bird, poop, done, automatic failure. But there's something else that I highlight in red, including water. In version 2.1, you could have the most horrible water quality with thousands of colonies of E. coli, and you were receiving just a down score. In other words, losing some points. Now those times are finished. If you have an issue with water, any water test showing that you exceeded the metrics given by PrimusGFS, that is 235 for contact and non-contact. Please, I know that many of you probably are thinking in the produce safety rule. No, in this case, PrimusGFS is more demanding, more strict than the produce safety rule. All type of water, contact and non-contact, any test should show that E. coli colonies, Escherichia coli colonies are less than 235 in 100 mLs. So if you have an unsuitable result and you didn't implement corrective actions, later we're going to talk the specific corrective action that the standard is looking for this type of events, the audit will fail. Yeah, I think this is the most dramatic change in the standard. Yeah, unsuitable water, test results, no evidence of corrective actions, automatic failure. Now, this is a very open question that allows the auditor to, fail an inspection by any, direct observation of gross contamination or something very, very potential to happen. Yeah. Like, for example, in the crew could be, well, this is a ranch, we're going to see the same question in the harvest crew module. But by the way, this question now is in module 2, 3, 1 farm, 2 greenhouse, 3 harvest crew, and 5 GMPs. Exactly the same question. Yeah. Another example that I've seen, of issues that could be used as a reference to fail an audit in this question. For example, field equipment, the tractor leaking, lubricants, the carter, the engine leaking lubricants over lettuce. Yeah. Product alteration. Question 20505 in a ranch audit, automatic failure of the audit. Okay, I have another question here from Anne Jones. What defines stores apart? Separate pallets in large room, okay. And segregation, think in the spirit, what is looking for that question about segregation in between food grade and non-food grade chemicals to prevent, transfer of use. So in other words, someone making a mistake. Ideally, as an auditor, I would love to see 2 different storages. Yeah, 2 different doors, 2 different buildings, etc. But if that is not possible, could be in the same storage, but you can segregate them physically. For example, shelf for food grade, shelf for non-food grade. Wherever works for you and is evident, that there's segregation that prevents, the transfer of use for the workers responsible to grab, chemicals from there. Yeah, but separate pallets in a large room, yeah, that could be. Yeah, but don't forget which ones are food grade. Food grade, non-food grade, postings. Yeah, posting could help to assure which ones are for food grade and non-food grade. And believe me, it's very common that workers make confusion with this. In my last inspection, they have a confusion with food grade lubricants. Yeah, in a facility. So better to signpost this to assure that people really knows which ones are food grades and which ones not food grade. And don't forget, this is not for me as an inspector. This is for you, for your people, to prevent transfer of use. Yeah. I have another question by Selena Rodriguez. Is 235 the limit for E. coli for farm standards? Well, this is in the next slides, in the water section, Selena, but yes. And that metric has been written in stone by PrimusGFS. Yeah. For any type of agricultural water, 235 and over that, including 235, is an unsuitable result. Yeah. But I have something about this, in the next slides. Okay, another question who came from the GMPs. This is a documental question. Are there written and communicated procedures in place that require food handlers, so people that has the potential to contact the products, to report any cuts or grazes, and or if they're suffering from any illnesses that might be a contamination risk to the products being produced? I'm going to stop there. So in this case could be something as a very brief policy, or of course included in your training program, where you explain, you teach to your workers that in case that they have a skin cut, an open wound, or they feel sick, during, the shift, that they need to communicate that to the supervisor. That's all. Yeah? But the second part, on return to work requirement. So if someone gets sick, and probably was absent for 2, 3 or more days, there should be you need to have a written policy to assess what are you going to do with this worker who came back after an illness to allow him to work again in potential contact with products. I've seen SOPs who refers the worker should bring a physician note. Don't put a rope in your neck. What about if the guy was having a flu? Maybe it was 2 or 3 days, in bed, then he recovered and he show up. Maybe for, those type of, illness could be enough a visual inspection by the supervisor. If the guy looks healthy or not, no mucus, no evidence that he's still sick. But we have another type of, illness like hepatitis, like typhus. No, that's very serious. So I've seen very well written, policies in regard to this, that they refer for minor concern illnesses like a flu, they are going to pass through a visual inspection by the farm manager, or the crew supervisor. But for significant illness like hepatitis, like typhus, oh yes, for that they need a note from the doctor, from the primary physician, releasing him, to allow him to come back, to work in potential contact with product. Now, United States, for the people of United States, auditors are not able to review any type of health checks or, any medical information. Privacy Act. So we just stay with the policy. Yeah? But in other countries, if those documents are not, protected by any confidentiality regulation, we can request them. Yeah. So keep in mind that people who is out of the United States. Now, if an auditor in the United States requests any type of medical information, health checks, wherever, during the inspection, you have to tell them, I'm sorry, I cannot provide you that because those documents are, covered under the U.S. Privacy Act. Yeah? Let me see if there's any question. Okay. No new question, just some comments. Okay. New question. Non-conformance records. I'm going to clarify the scope of this question. This is a document, it's a form where in theory you should be recording when your workers are failing to comply with your hygiene policies and procedures. For example, when you catch someone not washing their hands or working with a skin cut, wherever. Yeah. But this question is not designed or is not push you to record every and each one of the food safety incidents that you note with your workers. This question is targeting when it's a systematic problem. For example, you find the same person with systematic violation against the same or different hygiene policies. One day you catch him not washing their hands, other day not using gloves, his gloves are required, not using the restroom, for example, peeing behind a tree, wherever. In that case, when it's a systematic problem against one worker, you must complete this form. Or when it's a systematic problem against a group of workers. For example, that one crew has been observed, with multiple different hygiene, policies violations. Maybe the same, maybe different ones. So that's another systematic problem. So the key here is systematic, yeah? Now, auditee record must be viewed as confidential, and therefore verbal confirmation should be gained. We cannot request those specific records in the US. Yeah. Well, really, if you have the form and you confirm verbally there's no systematic violation against the hygiene policies and procedures by your workers, that will be enough. Now, if verbally you confirm that yes, you have a problem, we would like to see that, unless you consider those documents as confidential. If you consider those documents as confidential, the author is going to put that, you confirm that the form, that the form exists, that you verbally confirm that there was some systematic violation and those ones are recorded, but the company sees them as confidential. Yeah, and that's enough. Okay, the next section. Some new questions about restroom and hand washing station. All of them were pulled from the Harvest Crew modules. You remember that we talk about, the matching in between different modules in terms of scoring, automatic failure, but also in terms of questions. In version 2.1, we have, let's say, like 10 questions about hand washings and toilets. Yeah, and in the Harvest Crew, like 20. Now we have the same number in the farm and in the Harvest Crew module. So really, there's no new requirements. The new thing is that those requirements apply for the hand washing and the restroom use during the growing season too. Yeah. First, are hand washing stations adequate in number and appropriately located to worker access and monitoring usage? So in other words, visible hand washing stations provided for the growing season workers. But even if it's a new question coming from the Harvest Crew, the new thing here is that this is an automatic failure question. So if the auditor decides to score a non-compliance, not a deviation, read what I put in red, a 0 point non-compliant downscore in this question results in an automatic failure of the audit. So if the auditor finds something very significant against compliance of this, for example, you're not providing hand washing stations, or all the hand washings provided are not operational, the audit will fail. This is new in the ranch, farm, module. Yeah. Now, if the auditor found, for example, 1, 2, 3, of several hand washing stations lacking, for example, they're not operational or wherever, could decide, to impose a minor or a major. In that case, it's not an automatic failure question. I have a question by Tom Barkett. It is mandatory that all sanitation stations be hands-free? No, that's an ideal condition, but it's not a reason to downscore against this control point if they're not hands-free. Yeah. Okay, the next one. This question is as old as my grandmother. Are workers washing and sanitizing their hands before starting work each day, after using the restroom, after breaks, before putting on gloves when they're required, and whenever hands may be contaminated? This is a visual assessment about, compliance against the hand washing practices. Tip: check your trash cans located close to the hand washing stations. Why? We do that. The last audit that I did, last week, when I arrived to the Harvest Crew, yes, there were hand washing stations, they were full stock, everything looked fine. But I was not able to observe the hand washing practice. Why? Because all the workers were, harvesting. None of them used the toilets or left the harvest area while I was inspecting them. But what we do, I opened the trash can, I observed, no paper. So my next step was to talk with the crew foreman. Well, can you tell me, the frequency to clean, or to dispose of the garbage in the garbage receptacles? Well, we do that, at the end of the shift every day. Oh, very good frequency. So the trash cans who are now next to your hand washing station were, cleaned, and the garbage disposed of on last night. Yes, Enrique. I open it, I show, where's the paper towels of your workers? In theory, all of them, they wash their hands before commencing harvest. Yes, Enrique, but where's the paper? So I open a non-conformity, not because they were not washing their hands. Why? Because I don't have that evidence. Against, the procedure. There's no evidence that they're washing their hands and using paper towels after, they clean to dry their hands. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they were not washing their hands. Yeah, but I didn't have the fact. So don't forget, observe your workers, inspect your trash cans close to the next stations. I have another question. Jennifer, if the hand washing stopped pumping water, but it was replaced right away with a working one, Is this an automatic failure? Okay, Jennifer, it depends. I told you an automatic failure is usually no one fact. We collect more information. Let's say that you have only one hand washing station, and that only hand washing station, runs out of water. Potentially, this could be an automatic failure if the water or a new hand washing station was not provided immediately at the moment that someone catch that. Yeah, and of course, we start interviewing the workers. Well, did you know that the hand washing station ran out of water? Oh yes, Enrique. Today, when I arrived in the morning, there was no water. So what you did? No, nothing. Okay. And then I interview, the crew foreman. Are you aware that you're out of water? Yes, Enrique. But, I talked with my manager and he's sending, water to stock, the station or a new another hand washing station. And probably it's going to arrive in the next 30 minutes. At what time did you start harvesting today? Well, 3 hours ago. So during that period of 3 hours, the crew didn't have access to operational hand washing station. Yes, the audit will fail. Yeah, so it depends. Again, it's not just a fact. We build a scenario of compliance or non-compliance based on multiple facts against, this type of events. Okay. But by the way, but at least you're going to receive a deviation, eh? That's for sure. Okay, if that happens, during the inspection. Okay, next one. Let's continue with all questions. Visual assessment. There's no sign of any worker with boils, sores, open wounds, or exhibiting signs of foodborne illness working directly or indirectly with food. Don't forget that we're in the farm module. Forget the harvest crew, guys. No. That's another operation. In this case, we're targeting, the farm workers, if there are, on site. The next one, worker personal items are not being stored in the growing area or material storage area. So another visual assessment, we don't expect to see their, jackets, backpacks, wherever, in those areas. Next one, is smoking, eating, chewing, and drinking confined to designated areas, and spitting is prohibited in all areas. Another visual assessment. First, we don't expect to see people smoking, eating, or chewing tobacco or chewing gum or drinking something other than water in the growing areas or in the storage areas. Yeah. Of course, we expect to see that nobody's spitting in those areas. And sometimes, the workers are doing everything fine. And the company representative, is chewing tobacco. That's happened from time to time here in the East Coast. Is chewing tobacco during the inspection and throw a huge spit in front of me in the growing area. Oh, yes, of course, that's an evidence of a down score. In theory, the branch manager, the owner of the company, should be the one enforcing these practices. So it's the very first person, complying with them. Yeah? And then water. This is another question who came from the harvest crew. You remember that in version 2.1, we have a question about, provision of, drinking water for the field, the growing season workers. Now they add a new question. Also, single-use cups should be provided for them unless a drinking fountain or personal water bottles are provided to them. Okay, any questions so far? No, I think I answered all of them. Let me scroll down through the chat. No, we're good? Okay. The section agricultural input, formerly known in version 2.1 as the fertilizers crop nutrition section. Yeah. Well, the technical requirements are almost the same. There's no major surgery here. Almost the same technical requirement as for ranch version 2.1-2C. But the interpretation guideline expanded technical explanation. There is more detailed explanation in the evidence expected for compliance for several questions, mostly about heavy metals and pathogens of materials, who are obtained from animal waste, animal sources. And now they point very clear in the guideline, when you use any type of material was obtained from animal sources like manure, like compost, like fish emulsion, tea compost, wherever, with from animal content, the biological indicators to have in mind for testing or guarantees are Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli 157, and fecal coliforms. Yeah. In the case of the three first ones, Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli 157, no presence of them or below the detection limit of the lab. And in the case of fecal coliforms, less 1,000 colonies per gram. Yeah. Now, If you're producing your own materials, of course, you need to test. Now, if you're buying those materials from external suppliers, they can provide you, guarantee letters, copies of the lab test, including in the case of lab testing for microbiological, concerns, pathogens. They need to refer, if they're not sampling every lot, which is the sampling method that they're using. Yeah. That's all for the fertilizer section. So really, there's not new significant changes on the section. Yeah. Okay, section irrigation water. Again, no significant new requirements, but the scoring of sub-questions changed dramatically. Potential automatic failure by the lack of water testing. Yeah. In the past, if you didn't have water test, down score. Now, if you don't have the at least one water test per water source per year, automatic failure of the audit. Yeah. Some questions were divided in two. No big deal. So one was on a question, inspection log and disinfection record in case that you're, for example, chlorinating the water. Now we have two different questions. And question about unsuitable water result. What? Let me see. I lost the name of the person who was asking about this. It's in the chat. Well, someone ask a question about the metrics. Question about unsuitable water results. The metrics by PrimusGFS are written in stone. Is E. coli should be less than 235, colonies per 100 mLs. Could be MPN, CFU, whatever technique is using the lab. But the key is below 235. Yeah. If there's any issue for a single, result, there should be. Okay, Selena, I got the limits. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so if there any result over this, thresholds, there must be evidence of corrective action. But this corrective action should consider two branches. First, the water itself. Yeah, let's say it's a well, you shock with chlorine the well, you retest, everything is fine, but that's not enough. If the product was exposed to that water, there should be evidence of corrective actions with the product. In this case, crop testing. You need to pull samples of the crop and check for E. coli 157, Salmonella, and the result will be no detections. If there's any detection of these bad guys, in the microbiological world, that product should not be introduced in the supply chain. Yeah. Going back to this, so don't forget, if you have an unsuitable result, corrective actions with the water, and if applicable with the product. If you don't do this, the audit will fail. Yeah, automatic failure in the question that I showed you before. Probably that is the most dramatic or most important change, in the irrigation, in the water use section. Don't forget water use, irrigation, pesticide application, freeze-frost control, cooling the orchard, dust abatement, wherever you use that water during the growing season in the growing area for agronomic purposes. Now, testing frequency. In the past was very open. If you remember in version 2.1 was testing should be conducted at the expected frequencies. 99% of the growers, no, not 99, but 80%, 90% were, yeah, okay, I'm pulling, one sample per year. That could make sense, in a well. But what about water pulled from a river? The variability of the microbiological quality of that water could be huge, across the season. So really that was not enough. So PrimusGFS increased the expectation in terms of testing, yeah, in terms of frequency. So the rules are, every water source should be tested prior to use and then monthly. It doesn't matter if it's a river, a well, a pond. This is the first part of this rule. But there's always a but. If supported by a valid risk assessment, first, this is a document. Second, valid, please. A generic risk assessment, believe me, is not going to work. It's a specific risk assessment for that specific water source. Who consider historical data. Let's say that you're pulling water from a well and you have, I've seen people, Enrique, I have 3 years of testing. I'm testing 1 or twice a year, but in all the tests since I start testing years ago, there's always no presence. And if you see, my well is protected, there's no cattle operations, close to the well, so risk is minimum. Yes, I buy that. Absolutely understandable. Yeah. So that risk assessment could be accepted and even could define, that water will be tested once a year at the commencing of the season or during harvest season, wherever. Yeah. Now, if we're talking about, a river, maybe you can modify with a good risk assessment because the key is the historical quality of that water. So if you don't have any historical data, you need to follow at least the first season, this monthly rule. Yeah. But once you have historical data, you have an idea of the water quality from a microbiological perspective through the time. So based on that, you can justify a different, testing frequency. Now, which testing frequency? For example, there's some recommendation by the World Health Organization that, push people, in the world, to test the water at least 3 times per year. Makes sense to me. If you're using water from a vulnerable source like a canal, an open canal, a river, a creek, a reservoir, that the quality of that water could change from, across the season, especially in open flowing water sources like rivers. So in that case, you need to have a representative sampling program justified with a risk assessment to demonstrate that you're tracking the quality water across the time. In the case of an open and flowing water source. In the case of an open and non-flowing, water source like a reservoir, maybe it could be less, than 3 times a year. You decide that. But the key is historical data and the source itself. Yeah. With the wells, I see this will be very easy to justify if you have historical data. For open water sources, kind of complicated, but the key will be historical data. Now, if you show me historical data during inspection with a risk assessment saying that you have never had an unsuitable result, but then I ask, can you show me those historical, lab testing results? And I see that you were running in between 200, 220, 225. So you have a trend with E. coli. If you say once a year, probably the auditor is not going to accept that. But think about this. Commencing, middle, and close to harvest, risk is increased. That frequency could make sense. Now, again, observing potential trends with E. coli contamination in that water source. But at the very end, at least one water test per season per water source is required. That's a minimum. If you fail that one minimum, automatic failure. Okay, let me see if there's any question. No. Okay, let's continue. Oh. Can someone confirm that I'm connected? I'm having a message here that there's problems with the connection. Give me just 1 second, folks.
You're connected.
Okay, webinar jump freeze, Matt. I cannot change slides. I'm not sure what happened. Give me just 1 second, folks. Maybe I need to reload the slideshow. I apologize for this.
No, maybe I can.
Or maybe you. Okay, that's working. Okay.
There you go.
Okay, I'm sorry for that, folks. Okay, next one. Even if I told you there's no dramatic or significant change in the water section, even that there's one new question. 20908, is there a documented assessment for each water source covering animal access, upstream contamination or runoff, proper well condition if it's a well, water treatment if you're treating the well, like for example with a chlorination system, backflow prevention systems, maintenance if needed, cross-contamination from leaching, etc., etc. So this is a specific assessment for each water source that should be conducted at least annually, yeah, and review it annually, yeah, covering potential physical, chemical, and biological hazards or risk from animal access, upstream contamination. There's a lot of examples in the guideline, potential drift of pesticides, to open water sources, wherever, yeah? But again, a generic risk assessment, I'm not kind of sure you that it's going to work. Why? Because this is a suit who fit with a specific, water source. If you see here, for each water source, yeah? Now, if you have multiple wells, for example, and those wells are under the same conditions, yes, maybe you can group them, yeah? All of them are inside of the audited area in the farm. All of them have a backflow device, totally sealed, etc., etc. Just maybe you can group them. But if you have different water sources, well, reservoirs, canals, of course, you need at least one per every group of water sources. Yeah, and don't forget, it's a risk assessment, and then you know how you mitigate those risks. Now, if you think about this, there's some overlapping here. Why? Do you remember when we spoke about the question about the risk assessment covering, everything from planting up to harvest? In theory, in that risk assessment, this assessment of the water sources should be included. Yeah. So it's very common to see this as part of the big risk assessment with a section, identifying the specific water sources, in some cases grouping them based on same type of water source, same type of risk, and same historical results if you're dealing with the classic thing to reduce the sampling frequency from monthly to a different, frequency. Pesticides. No big changes here. Yeah, there's only one new question. There's some reorganization of the order of the question. For example, the very first question is the question about records. Makes a lot of sense because once we review the records, we can, break down, the information obtained from those records to check, for example, compliance with label instructions, EPA registration in the case of the United States, etc. Yeah. Question and guidelines about countries of destinations are more detailed. Emerald test is mandatory where there's more strict MRLs in the destination countries. And again, I'm going back to the first part of this webinar. If you are applying for a foreign country and the MRLs of that foreign country is more strict than the US, you need to prove compliance with those MRLs, pulling MRL tests, of course, at the commencing of harvest, or for the specific, batches of the crop or the product that you're shipping overseas or to any other foreign country, like Mexico, Canada, wherever. Now, the very first thing, to approach here is to compare the MRLs of the United States against the MRLs of the countries of destination. So if the countries of destination are less demanding, you're in compliance by default. Or if they're the same, like, Mexico and United States harmonized MRLs, so yes, you're going to be in compliance, but you need to prove that. Not me as the auditor. You need to have that evidence, available during the audit. The question about plant protection product storage increased expectation. Now it's required. The new stuff should be signposted, locked, secure. Containers should be off the floor, over shelves, over pallets, wherever, and the containers should have legible labels. Severance question, if scoring non-compliance, corrective actions are mandatory, if not automatic failure of the audit. The questions are the same as in the past. In the past were automatic failures immediately. For example, the evidence of the use of a non-razor pesticide. But now the standard opens that in case that the auditor, impose you a downscore in that question, you can submit corrective actions. Now, let's talk with the truth. Some of those corrective actions are almost impossible unless you implement a recall. For example, using a non-razor pesticide. Okay, and there's only one new question. 21014. For the people who was a user of the Primus standard audits a long time ago, this is a question that was in those checklists. I'm talking about Primus standard version 3.1, version 2.5, over 10 years ago. Are restricted entry intervals, signs posted in the areas where pesticide applications occur? This is a visual assessment. So if there's any area where you applied a pesticide and it's still, into the time frame of the reentry times, we expect to see signs posted to inform the workers, people, visitors, that area is banned to be accessed. In other words, it's still on hold. Now, if there's no application, well, or verbal or NA, I prefer in my case to score NA because there's no applications where re-entry times are required, at the time of the inspection. Okay, let me see if there's any question and we can move to module 4. Okay, Selena, nothing. What is the limit for coliform for irrigation usage? I'm going to use a different word, Selena. Pre-harvest water or agronomic water is not coliforms, it's E. coli, less than 235. Harvest queue, no significant changes in terms of technical requirements. Some question and expectation has been expanded to clarify the compliance criteria. So now we have a better explanation in how to comply with specific questions. A few new questions were pulled from the GMP checklist guidelines. That's the ones that we saw, in the farm part of the slideshow. Okay, the first question I think is, this was a missing question in the past. 40302, is there a documented training program with training logs for the sanitation workers, including best practices and chemical use details? Many times, during inspections, I review cleaning SOPs, for example, for packing tables for the harvest crew, for the harvest machine, for knife, clippers, etc. But when I interviewed the people, doing that cleaning and sanitation, what they told me did never match with this written SOPs. So this is key in this question. People responsible to execute the cleaning, procedures at harvest crew level must be trained on them, including the SOPs, the chemicals to use, how to monitor them, etc. So we're looking here for a training record. 40303. We saw this question in the farm module. It's exactly the same. Workers should communicate if they have any skin cut, or open wounds, harvest workers, or if they're feeling sick, during, the shift. And also there should be a written, return to work requirement. Exactly what we spoke, in the farm module, but now applying over the harvest workers. And the next one, exactly as in the farm module, the record of non-conformances, systematic non-conformance by harvest workers. Yeah? So if there's any, systematic problem with compliance against the hygiene policies, hygiene procedures of who applies for the harvest crew workers, there should be a record, showing that, and also, of course, documenting the corrective actions. That usually is a retraining, because in some cases the corrective action could be to fire someone. You train that person many times, and she's still failing. You give them warnings. They're still failing. Maybe you need to let them go. You need to record that. New question. Hand washing. Are total coliforms and generic E. coli tests conducted on the water used for hand washing at the required or expected frequency? This is brand new in the harvest crew module and makes a lot of sense. Hands are food contact surfaces. Yeah. So the water used in the hand washing stations must be tested. But in this case, we're going to increase the testing, if we compare this with farm. Pre-harvest water, usually the quality indicator worldwide is E. coli. But post-harvest, that means once you pull the fruit, the vegetable from the plant, post-harvest, the classic quality indicator is total coliform. And according to this new question, the test result should show that the water meets the EPA drinking water standard. In other words, there's no presence of total coliforms, or total coliforms are, less than the detection limit, depending the technique used by the laboratory where you're sending your samples. Now, suggestion. If you test for total coliforms, at the same time you're testing for fecal coliform and from E. coli. Total coliform, let's say about 200 bacteria, fecal coliform of those 200, 50 of them, and one of those fecal is E. coli. So by default, if you don't have total coliform, you don't have fecal and you don't have E. coli. But the problem is, what about if you have a positive, a result, a hit? It says, for example, total coliform, 10 colonies. Now becomes a concern. If it's only total coliforms, it's a yellow flag, as a way to say. But if it's E. coli, it's a red flag. And multiple times I've seen, test results for total coliforms, where some detections are shown. But if you don't know if it's E. coli, it's absolutely different concerns in terms of food safety. If there's E. coli, it's serious. That means poop, feces, in Spanish, caca, in the water. Yeah? So my suggestion is, even if total coliforms covers E. coli, request to your laboratory for this, water test to check total coliforms and E. coli. Yeah? It's not a significant difference in the price. That's the truth. Yeah? Don't forget, because if you have E. coli, later we're going to talk about the potential automatic failure question. Those hands where they rinse the water with water contaminated with E. coli, then after are touching the product. Oops, that product could be contaminated. Yeah. Okay, I have a question here from Travis. If the water that is used to wash your hands comes from the well that is tested for most probably number every month, is that okay? Yes, if you're testing for total coliform. It's not enough just to test for E. coli. Yeah, don't forget that you need to show that that water meets the EPA drinking water standards. Yeah. And that standard refers to no presence or under detection limit, for total coliforms. Yeah. Okay, the three questions are the classic question with any type of water sample, sampling. First, an SOP in how to pull the samples. Second, an SOP, a procedure explaining how you're going to deal in case of unsuitable results. In other words, presence of total coliform. Suggestion, open this to two types of corrective action. When it's just total coliform and when it's total coliforms and E. coli. Don't forget, E. coli, in that case, you need to start thinking in the corrective action also with product that was potentially contacted with that water through the hands of the harvest workers. And lastly, if there's any unsuitable result, the evidence that the SOP for unsuitable result has been implemented. In other words, records. Yeah, what you did, and how you assess the efficiency of that. Some new questions who came from the GMPs to the harvest crews. The first one, all items removed from garments, shirt, blues, top pockets. Visual assessment that your people, harvesting is or does not have top pockets, or they don't have nothing in their top pockets. The key is there should be no loose objects over the axis of the waist. Why? Because when you bend your body, to do wherever, exists a chance to drop wherever is over, the axis of your waist. Yeah. Next one. All chemicals stored securely, safely, and they're labeled correctly, exactly as we discussed in the farm, but now we're thinking the chemicals used during harvest. For example, cleaning chemicals, disinfection chemicals. We expect to see that they're stored in a safe place, secured, and the labels are in place. Now, if the store is not on site, NA, don't forget, on-site storage is the key. And the next one, food grade and non-food grade chemical segregation. Exactly what we spoke about them, in the farm module. But now thinking or applying this principle or this requirement to the chemicals used for during the harvest process. Could be, for example, if you're using harvest machine lubricants, you can have lubricants food grade and non-food grade, cleaning chemicals the same, etc. Okay. Are there a record of microbial testing for water used for post-harvest product contact? So the first, message in this question, if you're not using water in contact with the product, during the harvest process, NA. But if you're using this, for example, an hydro cooler or spraying water to keep the product hydrated, very common in the leafy green industry, for example, there should be lab tests showing that that water meets, again, the EPA drinking water standard. Don't forget. And this is for all the standards, this is a basic principle. Pre-harvest water, the indicator is E. coli. Post-harvest water, total coliform. But whenever you're testing for post-harvest water for total coliform, please include E. coli. Forget, presence of total coliform is a concern. Presence of E. coli is a problem. Well, if you're using water in contact with the product, together with the testing, you need to have, an SOP, a procedure for sampling, another SOP in how to deal with unsuitable results. Don't forget, we're talking about product contact water. So any corrective action in terms of SOP and record must consider product, not just the water, also the product. Yeah, product testing. And the new question about this very open question about automatic failure. Yeah, similar to what we discussed for the farm audit. If the crop, harvest products, ingredients, including water, food contact packaging, and food contact surfaces within accepted tolerance for spoilage and free from adulteration. So any evidence of any of these areas, contamination or gross contamination or very high risk of cross-contamination should lead to an automatic failure of this question. Areas to consider: unsuitable water tests and lack of corrective action for any type of water test at at harvest crew level. Direct evidence of product adulteration, for example, products in bins, and you observe a lot of bird droppings over those bins. Contaminated food contact surfaces, for example, tables, knives, belts with lubricants, etc. Uncontaminated packaging material. Special attention when you're packing in the field during your harvest process, where you leave, the packaging material. You probably, each time that you open a pallet, the product will be exposed. So there's potential contamination, for example, by bird droppings. Talk with your people, yeah? Let them know, to the people, pulling those, grabbing those clamshells, boxes, wherever from those pallets, to observe them. And if they find any issue, with bird droppings, for example, they need to communicate that to the crew foreman, and of course not use that, packaging material. Okay, next part, question about cleaning procedure. Let me see if there's any question about this automatic failure. No. Okay, question about cleaning procedures, packing tables, tools, harvest machines. The standard add the requirement to check and record the strength of disinfectant solutions. For example, if you're cleaning and disinfecting totes, clippers, knives, bins, wherever, the disinfection solution, for example, the water with chlorine or PAA or quaternary ammonium, wherever, must be tested to assure that the strength of the antimicrobial match with the expectations or the instructions in your own SOPs. Yeah? Now, summarizing this, there should be documented cleaning procedures, for everything used, during harvest, including, for example, grading and packing tables, hand tools, harvest containers. That's not new, but they should include the frequency of cleaning, that's not new, and sanitizing, the procedures, the method, and here comes the important part, and the strength test record of antimicrobial solution used to sanitize surfaces. So what you need to do if you're currently, your program is running under version 2.1. You need to add to this specific cleaning SOPs, which is the specific, target of strength, of concentration of the disinfection chemicals that you're using in your process to disinfect any type of equipment who has the potential to contact products, knives, clippers, bins, totes, buckets, wherever. Yeah, and of course you need to keep those records. Yeah. So here we have something brand new in, in the standard. Okay, I have another question from Michael. If testing water prior to UV treatment and after, do we still need to test each spigot? No. In this case, in your example, that you're treating the water with UV light. We expect to see the result or the quality of that water after the UV treatment at the source. There's no need, or it's not required by the standard, to check or to test each spigot, in the scope of this. Yeah. So it's the water source itself. I know where you're thinking, Michael. Yes, I'm missing something. The distribution. If you're using portable toilet, what about if there's contamination in the tank used for water in the portable toilet? Well, should be there. In my case, I would like to see that, but I'm just, explaining you what PrimusGFS is asking. Now, as any certification standard, this is the first step, for a food safety program. You can go beyond that because your most important thing in mind should be to provide safe product. PrimusGFS gives you the base. Of course, you can go beyond that based on common sense. Yeah. Okay. New questions. Another question from the GMPs. Is there a tool accountability, storage, and control program for knives and similar cutting hand tools using the harvest area when not in use? The big deal here is not just to have an inventory. This is not to prevent them from disappear. Yeah, this is to give the chance to usually the crew foreman to inspect those hand tools for wear and tear. So there should be a record showing how many were given at the commencing of the shift, how many were returned, and a confirmation that they were in good working order. That's all. The following questions applies only when water is used in contact with harvest products. So if you have a dry harvest process, in other words, you're not chilling the product with water or spraying water to keep the water irritated, NA. First, there should be a specific SOPs for the monitoring, testing, and changing of recirculated and batch water system. And for the monitoring of water, for example, if you have an hydrocooler, probably you're using your recirculating water, you need to have an SOP who refers which are your target or your acceptable, range of concentration of the antimicrobial that you're using. The SOP should explain how to monitor, the strength, of that antimicrobial, the frequency, the forms to use, etc., etc. And something very important, and the water changing. Yeah, so the frequency to change water. Okay, next one. First, we have the SOP, now the records. So the records should show the implementation of that SOP, that you're completing the records as should be, at the frequency defined by your SOP, that, the result of them shows that the system, the water is in control. And if there's any isolated deviation, the corrective actions implemented. Yeah. In the case of tomatoes, you need to think also in the temperature checks. People, growing tomatoes in the US, you need to have in mind the TGAPS, the tomato metrics, the tomato guidelines. In that case, you need to be recording that there's a 10-degree difference in between the tomato temperature and the chilling water and the water using the hydrocooler, for example, to minimize the risk of, absorption by the product of contaminated water. And a specific SOP that details, the specific antimicrobial parameters. Give me just 1 second. Yes, it's related with what I just told you. In this case, it's a specific part of the SOP where, the specific, parameters, of the antimicrobials you use, is explained. For example, that you're going to be using water in between 100 to 100 parts per million of free chlorine. Yeah. Now, the key here is to demonstrate from where you grab those numbers. Could be, in the label, if you're using, for example, quaternary ammoniums or PAA, but that you're not going to see that in the chlorine, container label. So in that case, you need to have proof of parameter derivation. You need, for example, the support of a validation study. Yeah? Recommendation, very common to use for this type of things, the classic, study from Trevor Saslow from USC Davis, for the use of chlorine in wash taps. This is one of many. Then records. There should be records showing the monitoring of the antimicrobial, and of course, these records should show that the monitoring start, at the start up of the production, and then in a frequency that assures the stability of the system. For example, if you put them testing, monitoring the water at the commencing and at the end, probably it's not going to work. Why? Because we want to know how it looks, or how performs, the chlorine, through the shift, through the time that you're, for example, chilling the product. So we're going to see the record to see first if you comply with your own SOPs in terms of frequency, etc. But at the same time, checking that the frequency that you set in your SOP and followed by your operator assures the stability of the system. Yeah, it's possible to see some deviations, but should be isolated events. So if you have multiple events, really you need to increase the frequency. Yeah, to assure that the system remains stable, during the process. Next one, a visual. Does the operation use the appropriate test strips, test kits, or test proof for verifying the concentration of the antimicrobials? So I'm going to give you an example of a mistake. More than one time I've seen, for example, people monitoring the strength of chlorine, during the harvest process. They use water for wherever. And when I request the monitoring, the operator comes with a test strip. I ask, may I see the test strips? And I see swimming pool test strips. And those ones measure in between 0 to 5 parts per million of free chlorine. And according to the SOPs, they should be targeting in between 100 to 100 parts per million of free chlorine. Of course, those test strips are not useful. Why? Because the range goes up to 5, 1 by 1. And you need something, test strips, if you're using test strips, that can allow you to measure below 100 and over 150 to have enough room in between, your set ranges to estimate, or to monitor, the strength of those antimicrobials. Another important thing to see in the case of test strips is to see that the containers show that they're not expired. Yeah. More new questions. Transport vehicles like forklifts, visual assessment that they're clean and not a source of contamination, and they're being used in a sanitary manner. Attention with the sanitary manner. I'm not sure why, but sometimes forklift looks like a picnic area. They have a sandwich, a cheeseburger, a Coca-Cola, a water bottle. No, it's not a picnic area. Yeah. So visual assessment that they're clean, and they're used according to the purpose. And this part, the next one, post-harvest applications. The following section or the following questions applies only when there's post-harvest treatments at the point of harvest. I've never seen this in the United States, but I've seen this, for example, in Chile, in the table grape industry, that they apply SO2 with a pistol, to each one of the boxes, that they pack. Now, so if you're applying any type, for example, of fungicide, any type of post-harvest plant protection product, the following question applies. Where products are destined for export, and this is a new question, there are records showing that the application rates are sufficient to meet the MRLs of the entry requirements of the country of export. So if you apply for a foreign country, and that country has more strict, more demanding MRLs, this question applies. And the only way to deal with this question by PrimusGFS guidelines is to pull MRL test, a residue test. Yeah, and there you need to show that the product, at least the one who's shipped, to the foreign countries, so those external markets, is in compliance with the MRLs of those, countries. And lastly, when storages for harvest items is on-site, packaging, equipment, tools, wherever, pest controls. Now, the increased expectation, we have a question about, the pest control program in storages in version 2.1, but now there's more detailed question about, where the pest control devices are located, the amount of them, where they need to place them, the distance in between them. There should be a schematic showing the position where they're located, those pest control devices. There should be monitoring records. There's no way to use, bait stations inside of the storages, only about the outside. In other words, PrimusGFS pull exactly the same requirements at facility level and extrapolate them, to the storages when they're on site in the harvest crew module. Now, if it's not on site, of course, we're not going to expect that, but that not means that you should not follow those, recommendations or those guidelines. And that's all, folks. So we start 10 to 2 hours and 45 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. I'm not sure if there's any other question.